Chapter 15, in which invitations and magazines circulate. Chapter text over the next several days. Harry was of the opinion that everything he had learned last year had leaked out his ears and was somewhere in the Burrow's garden. Nothing he had learned seemed to have stuck, and the only class he felt otherwise in was potions, for the obvious reason. Indeed, Professor Slughorn was effervescent in his praise of both Harry and Ron, announced towards the end of class that he was organizing some much-requested extracurricular potions labs. Please sign the form up front if interested, so he had an idea of the lab size. Harry, Ron, and Hermione signed up, Neville driven to sign by Snips, who had once again spent most of the class stopping him from making some potentially fatal errors. The four of them did find an empty classroom during a free period and ran through all the spells they thought they remembered from last year, which made Harry feel better about things. Sure, he still felt rusty, but it seemed magic was like learning to ride a bike, theoretically. He had never learned, and Dudley only really had a mountain bike because he wanted one, not because he used it. Defense against the dark arts was a disaster. There was no sugar-coating it. From the extra-long quiz that was all about Lockhart to being called out on his fame, that Harry really didn't care for, to having a swarm of Cornish pixies released in the class, Harry's only consolation was that Lockhart couldn't possibly have any connection to Voldemort. At least, Harry was pretty sure Voldemort had a minimum standard for competence. But then again, he had been bested by a baby, so that was up in the air. Oliver Wood's passion for Quidditch had not been dimmed over the summer. Matter of fact, he seemed more fervent for not being able to play for several months. And regrettably, Oliver Wood wanted to play rain, shine, tidal wave, whatever. Harry was pretty sure a dragon could nest in the Quidditch pitch, and Wood would just say, well, it's only a little hazard. He was also pretty sure that Wood would consider Harry getting his ear chewed off, figuratively, by Filch for tracking mud in also qualified as a little hazard. Shortly after that incident, they learned the Scourgify charm in class, and Harry made sure to use it before entering the castle every single time afterwards. After all, he didn't think there were very many more vanishing cabinets that Sir Nicholas could get Peeves to drop. On the positive side, that did see Harry getting invited to a Death Day party, which sounded interesting enough. Harry brought it up with Ron and Hermione, who agreed to go with him. Snips bounced up and down and did a passable imitation of Slughorn. "He's got a point," Hermione said when Ron guessed it. "If we're going to be in the dungeons, we'll need to let the head of Slytherin know. Professor Slughorn knows the dungeons better than anyone, and you know what happened last Halloween." Hermione nearly getting killed by the troll because none of the teachers knew she wasn't at the feast. "Fair point," Harry admitted. Professor Slughorn, intriguingly, was excited about the concept of a Death Day party, agreed to escort them to it. "Just wait for me in the entrance hall, would you? I have to escort my first years to the feast." It was workable enough that they all agreed to it, which would have had everything leading up to Halloween as very uneventful, if it weren't for the fact that the Slytherin team was trying to muscle in during Gryffindor practice, apparently thanks to Malfoy's father, who was on the school board and wrote up a note that said they could to train their new seeker, who, oh, by the way, was Malfoy. And did we mention that Malfoy's father also bought the Slytherin team brand new Nimbus 2001s? Because that was relevant and apparently worth mentioning every time Malfoy crossed Harry's path, often enough that Harry thought Malfoy might be stalking him. At least the Gryffindor team didn't buy their way in, Hermione spat one day when this became too much. They got in on pure raw talent. This was in a hall between classes, and had enough students around to make the resounding ooh very impressive indeed. Malfoy's ears pinked, and he spluttered for a few moments before saying, "No one cares what you think, you filthy little mudblood." Harry registered Snips leaving the hood of his robes, right as Snips connected with Malfoy's face, and bit down hard. Crabbe and Goyle registered that as Harry casting a spell, shot hexes at him, Ron and Hermione countered, Harry pulling his own wand out with the intent to get Snips. The whole quickly devolved into a full-on duel, and by the time Harry retrieved Snips, several teachers plus Hagrid had come in to restore order. "Everyone who can hear my voice has detention for a week." "No, Everson, being deaf doesn't absolve you, Phileas tell him, and 10 points from your respective houses per student." Professor McGonagall yelled, waving her wand and neutralizing several spells. Several wands also flew into her free hand. Now what started this mess? Malfoy jabbed a finger at Harry. Potter's weird pet attacked me. Harry quickly stuffed Snips into his pocket, ignoring his protesting squeak, pointed at Malfoy. Malfoy started it. He called Hermione AUM. Well, I don't know what he called her, exactly. He called me a mudblood, Hermione said. Harry sensed that Malfoy was in trouble from the thunderous expression on McGonagall's face. Indeed, after reading him the riot act on how bigotry was not tolerated at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall docked Malfoy another 50 points and assigned him a month's worth of detention. Harry had the sinking feeling he'd be having to watch his back again. And then he was distracted by Ron vomiting up slugs. Ron, Hermione yelped, are you okay? No, Ron groaned. I tried to hex someone and it rebounded. Professor McGonagall sighed, waved her wand for attention again. Anyone who needs medical attention, please follow Mr. Hagrid to the hospital wing. Right, see me, Ron, up you get, Hagrid said, picking Ron up. Neville, you too Thar looks like a right nasty stingin' hex. Harry and Hermione, as well as a gaggle of other students, trailed after Hagrid, filed into the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey was bustling everywhere, tending to everyone at once it seemed. Hagrid came back from the cupboard with a bucket. Now, Ron, this calls for specialized equipment, Hagrid said, plonking the bucket down in front of him. No choice but to let that peter out, sorry. Ron groaned, resigning himself to a long, arduous, gross time. Snips, meanwhile, was perched next to Ron, supervising him vomiting slugs with wings tightly folded. Going after Malfoy as he had, Harry suspected that Snips too knew precisely what Malfoy had called Hermione, and had not approved either. Goodness gracious, the little thing was seething. This wasn't the first time, Harry recalled. Malfoy had used that word before, and Snips had lit into him, in the Forbidden Forest during their detention. Harry had meant to ask about that word, thought he could be forgiven the mental slip, considering everything that had followed. Now, however, maybe he could get an answer. What's a mudblood? He asked Hagrid. Hagrid looked like Harry had said the worst curse word imaginable. Now, where'd you hear an awful thing like Thar? Malfoy called Hermione that. It's what kicked the whole thing off, Harry said, shooting Hermione an apologetic look. She waved him off, keeping her head low. Well, Thar word is a really filthy lowbrow thing to call anyone who's not a pureblood. Not Thar, pure if you think calling someone a name like Thar makes you better'n them. I mean they haven't made a spell yet Thar or Hermione can't do. Yeah, Ron got out before vomiting up another mouthful of slugs. Although I wish she'd come up with a counterspell for this. Hermione gingerly patted Ron on the shoulder. I'll think of something. About 30 students had ended up with detention following that mess. The lot of them, Harry knew that Ron, still occasionally burping up slugs that night, ended up working for Filch. Hermione was helping Madame Pince, and Neville was working in the hospital wing, probably in anticipation of injuries. Harry felt that the Slytherins scrubbing the dungeons. Heck, anyone else got the better end of the deal than he did. Because here he was, for the third night of his week's worth of detention, helping Gilderoy Lockhart sort and answer his fan mail, at Lockhart's insistence. Got to hear lectures on how to manage his fame and fighting only gets you bad PR. Harry, never resort to it, and so many other things that he wondered if there was a spell that stuffed your ears full of cotton so you didn't have to listen anymore. Honestly, if Professor McGonagall had wanted Harry to stay out of trouble, she couldn't have been more effective if she had picked this herself. She hadn't, he was assured, because he was pretty sure she wouldn't wish this on her worst enemy. Reflecting on it, it probably wouldn't have been so bad if he had company, but after the second night when he had to restrain Snips, he sent the little thing to the library with Hermione to avoid losing a teacher before the midterms. Not that hexing Lockhart himself wasn't growing very tempting. Rip, kill, let me kill. Harry jerked upright. Did he hear? What did he just hear? Ah, but that was a fine time, Harry. Harry, are you even listening to me? Ah, Harry noised, glancing back at Lockhart. UHNO, sorry, I thought I heard something. Pretty sure he had, at least. Are you all right, Harry? You look tired, Lockhart said, peering at Harry before looking at a device on his desk. Well, and no wonder, look at the time. Ah, well, you know what they say, time flies when you're having fun. I'll see you after dinner tomorrow, same time, same place. Ah, sure, Harry said, too distracted to focus on that. Didn't stop him from hustling out of Lockhart's office, though. Once he was out in the empty hall, though, he stayed as still and quiet as possible, senses straining for what felt like an eternity. Nothing, nothing at all. Maybe he had dozed off. But looking around, Hogwarts was beautiful and amazing, certainly, but right now it was almost scary. He shook his head and hustled for the tower with plans to dive headfirst in his bed and not wake up until breakfast. Harry was seriously debating on sharing his odd experience with his friends the next morning. On the one hand, if he had really heard it, it was a problem. On the other, if he had just dreamed it, it'd get them all worked up over nothing. So I don't know if I dreamt something up or not, Harry told Snips, stretching on his pillow. Share, don't share. Snips blinked blearily at him, and Harry couldn't help but wonder if small bat things needed coffee sometimes. As it turned out, though, Harry had something else to distract him at breakfast. Hello, Harry, Luna Lovegood said, plopping down next to him. Hello, Luna, Harry returned, before blinking at what she put on the table. Doing some reading. Actually, the article got posted, and I figured you'd like a copy, Luna said, handing him a magazine with the Quibbler across it in garish letters. And one for Hermione and Ron, and several for his brothers, whereas Colin, his dad, might like one. Flipping through it as Neville asked about a copy, Harry's first impression of the magazine was that it was like one of those fanzines with puzzles and odd tricks in them, although several of the articles had him puzzling more than the actual puzzles. Luna, he asked, what exactly is a crumple-horned snorkack? Which started an explanation that lasted through the rest of breakfast. Luna served herself at the Gryffindor table again, pausing occasionally to sell a copy or subscription of the Quibbler. Actually, that was an idea. Hey, Luna, how much is a subscription to your family's magazine? Chapter 16, in which secret chambers are opened. Chapter text Mischief Night had Harry, Ron, and Hermione debating on what would be proper attire for a Death Day party. Aren't we going to be wearing our robes, though? Ron asked. So it shouldn't really matter, right? It's the principle of it, Hermione said. Sir Nicholas would like the gesture that we wore our best clothes for the event, wouldn't you agree? Harry, personally, had been wearing his best clothes ever since he bought new ones at Diagon Alley. Dudley's old rags had been mostly shrunk down to his size and cleaned, with him resolving that he'd only wear them at the Dursleys, or when he was assured he would be doing something messy, like repotting mandrakes in herbology. And goodness, did he have fun with the sweaters Fred and George had picked out, especially once the sales clerk showed him how you could make the patterns move by squeezing the tag, which, possibly thanks to magic, never itched. Currently, he had a sweater on that depicted a starry night over a forest, which occasionally had bats, owls, and very rarely a dragon fly past the moon. Harry was going to have a very hard time not wearing any of these clothes come summer. They finally came to an agreement that they'd wear nice clothes under their robes, because as Hermione said, it was the principle of it. Halloween Day itself didn't see much action beyond cleaning up the various pranks from the night before, although they did get the first inclinations on what it was the twins had been doing. Oi, Dean said to Ron at breakfast. Since when did you have a brother in Slytherin and Ravenclaw? Do what? Ron asked, looked when Dean pointed. Harry looked too, saw Fred dressed in Slytherin colours at the Slytherin table, and George in similar straights at the Ravenclaw table. Fred must have lost the coin toss, Ron decided. After listening to the twins very loudly declare that they were insulted their respective houses, didn't recognize them, I've been in the dorm for 4 years now, everyone decided to go back to what they were doing. Apparently, this didn't quite qualify as a stir by wizarding standards. The trio heavily debated on actually going to the Death Day party when they saw just how the Great Hall looked, but they had made a promise, and Professor Slughorn was also along for the ride to ensure they were committed. He did assure them that he'd come up with an appropriate excuse if they found themselves disliking the party. Ghosts have different standards for these things after all, and pointed out they probably wouldn't be there too long anyway, because the ghosts would be wanting to make an appearance at the feast. It was pretty impressive seeing Slughorn giving a member of the Headless Hunter dressing down for insulting Sir Nicholas, but the rest of the party was, in all honesty, rather dead. Sir Nicholas did thank them thoroughly for taking time out of their schedules to visit when they made their excuses and departed. I think we should make a pact, Ron announced once they were out of earshot. That should we end up as ghosts will have more epic parties than that. Ron, it wasn't that bad, Hermione chided. Harry opened his mouth to agree with Ron. Kill, let me kill. Harry froze, snapped his head around, the hair on the nape of his neck standing on end. What? Ron asked. What is it? Did you hear that? Harry asked. Ron and Hermione shook their heads. Perhaps you heard one of the ghosts heading for the Great Hall early, Professor Slughorn suggested. One of the ghosts would be talking about killing someone. Harry asked blankly. Let me rip, let me tear, I smell blood. I smell blood. There it is again, Harry squawked, pointing. It's coming from that way. Harry, no, Hermione scolded, catching his arm right as Snips bit his ear. No running after voices talking about killing. There's a self-preservation thing, Ron added. Professor Slughorn, meanwhile, had freed his wand, sent a bright light shooting away, turned to the hole Harry had identified, wand at the ready. Now that's done. Get behind me, children, he said, waving them back. Harry, you said this corridor. When Harry nodded, very well, much as I'd rather wait for reinforcements, we can't let whatever it is roam loose in the castle. They minced their way through the corridors, everyone with their wands out, Harry pointing out a turning whenever he heard the voice again. Jai! Ron yelped, feet splashing in water. What the? Ah, Professor Slughorn said, examining the flooded corridor. Miss Myrtle took Peeves' actions poorly, I see. Could I have heard her? Harry asked. Doubtful, Myrtle has never been the murderous sort. Professor Slughorn waved his wand, vanishing the water. There's something over there, Hermione said, pointing. They reached the strange item Hermione pointed out, realized that it was a frozen Mrs. Norris dangling from a torch just as several teachers arrived. We've got the students heading back to their dorms, Professor McGonagall said, approaching them. This makes 2 Halloweens in a row for goodness. Oh my word, she gasped, freezing at the sight of Mrs. Norris, and written in big red letters up and down the corridor. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. By breakfast on All Saints' Day, the whole of the castle was abuzz with rumor, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione had to once again write down, copy, and distribute what they knew of the event. Does Hogwarts have a school newspaper? Hermione asked Percy, helping her with the copying. I'll bring it up with Professor McGonagall next prefect's meeting, he said. At breakfast the next day, Dumbledore made an announcement. As you have no doubt heard, Mrs. Norris has been petrified and left with a disturbing message, Dumbledore said. We are working to track down the culprit as we speak. In the meantime, I would like to reassure everyone that Mrs. Norris will not suffer any permanent damage, he continued, nodding at Mr. Filch, still sobbing over his cat. Professor Sprout has a crop of mandrakes in the greenhouses this year, which will be used to make a potion that will revive Mrs. Norris as soon as they are mature. As for the message left on the walls, rest assured that we are looking into anything involving the Chamber of Secrets, and will alert you if there is a need to worry. Saying that, we don't feel there is a need to worry just yet, so you may continue with your current foci. This, of course, did nothing to stop the Hogwarts gossip mill from working overtime. And considering this smacked of yet another Hogwarts mystery on par with the Sorcerer's Stone last year, everyone was devoting every ounce of spare time to investigating the Chamber of Secrets, much to Hermione's dismay, only because it meant that all the books on the subject were checked out of the library. There's a waiting list as tall as Hagrid, she reported at dinner. Think we should get involved? Ron asked. I mean, after last year, I'm not so sure. We're already involved, though, Harry pointed out. We're the ones who found Mrs. Norris. I was afraid of that. Hello, Luna. Hello, Luna said, Ginny and Colin sitting next to her as she sat next to Ron. I was wondering if I could have you three's permission to publish your new document in the Quibbler. The 3 of them chorused agreement, sure. Just please let everyone know that they didn't want any letters asking for details like last time. I'll try to make sure that's stressed, Luna said, before turning to Neville. Do you want to be on our team, Neville? What? Neville asked blankly. Everyone's splitting up into teams to investigate this Chamber of Secrets, Luna said, which is very convenient, as I was wanting to investigate it for Dad. Ginny and Colin and I have already teamed up for this, and we were wondering if you wanted to be on our team. I guess, Neville said, still looking very confused. Shouldn't you have another Ravenclaw on your team? Dean asked. Because if you get to the bottom of this with 3 Gryffindors, we get most of the points. The lion's share, Seamus corrected. That's true. I already asked around my house. Everyone has already formed teams, it seems, Luna said. Guess that's their loss then, Ron said, tugging a pot pie over to him. Harry, Ron, and Hermione heavily debated about getting involved. Well, more than they were. Harry was kind of on the fence, didn't really want to get into another school-sized scheme after last year, but couldn't help thinking about that sinister voice. It was definitely the topic of debate when they went for tea at Hagrid's. Rig, nasty business, all tha, Hagrid said, in between teaching Harry how to measure gauge with his knitting, although the hat he was attempting was again shaping up to be tea-cozy shaped. Remember the last time? I shouldn't have said tha. Ron dropped his treacle tart. It was open before. Well, please, Hagrid, you can't say that and then not tell us, Hermione said. Especially Hermione, Ron said. She's gone mental trying to find information on it, no offense. None taken, said Hermione's mouth, although her eyes said hexes later. Well, Hagrid hemmed, Hod finally relented. It was well on 50 years ago now. I was attending at the time, about your age. Lot of attacks, one poor girl died. Myrtle, I think her name was, pretty sure she sat behind me in charms. Poor girl. Snips bit Ron on the hand for muttering under his breath, definitely if she sat behind you. Although Harry supposed he had a point, considering he imagined Hagrid still took up a bit of the view even when sitting down. Did anyone find out who was responsible? Hermione asked. No, Hagrid said, expression dark. More's the pity. I day like to ring the bloke responsible myself. Ah, tea's done. Tha's looking much better, Harry. Thanks, Harry said, but I think you'll be getting a new tea cozy. Tha's good. Fang chewed on the last one. Hermione didn't give up on the Chamber of Secrets, and Ron and Harry resigned themselves to being on her team. The next history of magic had her pumping Professor Binns for information, and then Professor McGonagall in Transfiguration. What they got was that Salazar Slytherin made the Chamber of Secrets, meaning the heir was probably in Slytherin. Harry heard from a few of his Slytherin acquaintances in the Slug Club that once this news spread, and it had like wildfire, that everyone in the Slytherin common room immediately pounced on each other in their haste to vet each other and out someone as the culprit, mostly because points. It's got to be like a really elaborate game of Clue, Ross Ambrose said. Isn't that a muggle game? Ernie Macmillan asked. It is, Harry confirmed. How did you hear of it? My dad remarried a muggle woman when Mum died. I was 5, Ross said, then paused. Boy, I hope that doesn't put me on the target list. Harry and Ernie both assured him that as a Slytherin he'd be fine. I'd be more worried about me, Harry told him. I didn't even know all this existed before Hagrid came along. I've not heard this story, Ernie said, leaning on the table. Harry shared, feeling it was an improvement over everyone discussing who was muggle-born or not, and whether or not half-bloods fell into the category. And Hermione, tell us more about your one theory, Hermione having joined the Slug Club shortly after a combination of recommendation from Harry and Slughorn seeing her grades. In his words, this girl is going places. Wow, Ross said finally. Your relatives really don't like magic. Yeah, Harry said, blinking at his sundae dish refilling itself, complete with cherry on top. I don't know why. There was also a whole secret black market that sprung up among the students, involving charms and talismans that were supposed to ward off whatever. Neville was buying quite a bit, and telling everyone I was almost a squib, so yes, I have to worry, and Luna buying them for educational purposes. Harry found he liked Luna and the Quibbler, although Hermione brushed it off as nonsense after a few readings. You know that's all fake, right? She asked, side-eyeing the article he was reading on the crumple-horned snortcax. But didn't you think magic and unicorns and dragons and three-headed dogs were all fake before Hogwarts? Harry countered. We can't rightly know for sure, right? I personally want an article on Raxperts, Ron said. I need to know more about that one. Boys, Hermione huffed, burying her nose in her book. Harry wasn't sure what that had to do with anything, so decided not to comment. Ah, good, no Weasleys to encroach on business, an upper-year Slytherin said, glancing around the hall before pacing down it. Charms and talismans tried and tested. What am I, invisible? Ron demanded. Ah, right, a customer, no doubt. A Weasley, actually. What are Fred and George getting in on this? Fred, George, Hubert, Edmund, Donald. Ron blinked. Do what? Somehow I've missed there being a Weasley in Slytherin all this time. My contacts inform me that Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff have had similar oversights. Ron made an enlightened noise. So that's what they've been doing. As the one who may or may not be assisting, I wouldn't know. The Slytherin extended a hand. Fergus McDougal at your service. Hello, Harry said, shaking his hand first. I'm Harry. Harry Potter, yes I know, Fergus said, pointing at Harry's head when he let go. You should invest in a hat if you want that to be a surprise. I keep trying to knit one, it doesn't end well. Well, I hear practice makes perfect, and by process of elimination you might be Ron Weasley. Yeah, Ron said, shaking his hand. And this is Hermione. She might come up for air later, she's in her deep reading mood. An excellent way to avoid conversation, to be sure. There you are. Not trying to pollute Eichel Gryffindors, are you? Good to see you, Donald, Fergus said to Fred before eyeing George. Hubert, now is that any way to treat a Hufflepuff? George asked. Especially with the way they know the castle, Fred said. Not very cunning for a Slytherin. Or you take that back. Never. And while authority figures are distracted, I can continue with my previous activities, Fergus said, hustling away after handing them a card. My hours. Ron seemed consternated. I never knew there was a Slytherin version of Fred and George. I'm pretty sure that is Fred and George, Harry pointed out, indicating the twins tussling. I know that, I meant Fergus. Is he in the Slug Club? Not sure, Ginny, are you okay? Ron asked as his little sister came up. You're not still upset about Mrs. Norris, are you? Because you really shouldn't, she was a right foul, Ron, Hermione interrupted. She's coming out of the book, everyone behave. Harry felt Ron had the slap upside the head coming. No, I'm not Ron, Ginny said, a little red-faced as she avoided looking at Harry. I'm meeting up with Luna. We're going to try to track down the heir. Ron blanched, and even Fred and George stopped. Ginny, no. It's all right. We're going to have Neville with us. Snips snorted so hard he knocked himself out of the hood of Harry's robes, and it's not like we're wandering off by ourselves so. Hello, Luna greeted. Enjoying your reading, Harry. Yeah, Harry said, lifting Snips back to his hood. This really does help. I want an article on Raxperts next, Ron said, and less of you two going off by yourselves. It's okay, we have Neville. From the sounds of it, Snips was gnawing on Harry's robes to keep from laughing so hard he hurt. Oi, Neville, Fred yelled, waving at the Gryffindor hastening after Colin Creevey. You better take care of our baby sister. Yeah, George added. We Hufflepuffs can get surprisingly scary when motivated. Neville stopped, apparently unsure how to take this. Wow, Colin said. How many siblings do you have? Well, there's Donald, Bill, Charlie, Fred, George, Eichel, Ronnie, Fred added. And you have to call him that, it's the rule. Hermione, can I borrow your book? Ron asked. If it's to hit your brothers again, then no, Hermione said. Percy, Ginny, Edmund. I met Edmund, Luna said. He seemed very nice. Well, we Weasleys do try. So are we ready to go? Colin asked. Yes, Ginny said, shouldering her bag. Luna, Neville asked, looking at Luna's feet, which now that Harry looked were bare. Where are your shoes? I'm not sure. They all seem to have gone missing, Luna said. Perhaps we'll come across them in our search for the heir, or maybe the heir stole them for some reason. It's a possibility we might have to entertain. Or maybe it's an entirely different mystery, George pointed out. Those are tricky, Fred said. Although I don't think you get house points for solving a shoe caper. We don't know that. That's true. We should probably go now, Ginny said, heading off, Colin running after her with his camera. Yes, Luna agreed, following. I hope it's not that new magical species discovered in Hawaii. I don't want to lose all my left shoes. Neville was sighing as he followed. I'm not ready to be the mature one of the group. Snips laughed so hard he fell to the floor. Chapter 17, in which Bludgers go rogue. Chapter text: The following days saw more progress on the missing shoes case than the Chamber of Secrets. Harry was honestly starting to entertain the notion that it had been an elaborate and ill-intentioned Halloween prank. Brought it up to Ron one day. Definite emphasis on ill-intentioned, Ron said, after some thought, happy for the distraction from their history of magic essays, which left Harry seriously wondering why wizards and goblins even bothered with each other. From what I've heard from my brothers, Halloween pranks are generally like Fred and George blowing up a toilet, or this one time where someone turned the fourth floor into lava. Not real lava, but made it look like it. This is a bit too mean for me to buy that. That was a fair point, Harry supposed. Even if the use of magic did seem to okay some nasty things, it was easy to hex someone into being covered from head to toe in boils if a counter curse made it go away in a heartbeat. Hermione was still in the library come Saturday, so Harry and Ron helped Luna's team hunt for her shoes, not the air. It could be Nargles, Luna said, peering up at a statue and then at its feet. They tend to be mischievous. I've decided I'm taking care of magical creatures next year, Neville said. There's an awful lot of them I've never heard of. Speaking of magical creatures, Harry asked Snips for help, while Neville explained to Colin that you could take extra classes starting 3rd year and drop some core classes if you wanted to come 6th year. Snips looked around, up at the rafters before looking at him and shrugging. So I guess Snips isn't a shoe finder, Ron said, as Snips took to the air and started circling around them. Isn't there a spell or something that could do this? Harry wondered. I feel like there should be a finding things spell. Hermione would know. Wouldn't one of the teachers know too? Ginny asked. I think Professor Flitwick is in his office, Luna said. Professor Flitwick was, and after asking their question and explaining that they were looking because of Luna's missing shoes, and then explaining what Nargles were, Professor Flitwick went over the summoning charm with them. I don't usually teach this to students until 4th year, he told them, because it's very important you get the enunciation right. This was made clear when Neville accidentally summoned the futon and had to have it levitated off of him. Harry almost had the spell by dinner, though, and Professor Flitwick invited them back the next day to try again, promising extra credit and points if they could get it. We'll go over some basic security charms as well, he added, looking at Luna, as that should help narrow down the culprits who have been stealing your shoes. Speaking of, Akio, Miss Lovegood's shoes. Neville once again found himself buried under several summoned items. It took most of the rest of the week to master the summoning charm. Harry was among the last, mostly because all of his free time was spent on the Quidditch field practicing until he could hardly stand. I have it on good authority that Slytherin's banking on us to be too exhausted to play, Fred said after practice one day. Did Donald bet against his own family? George asked. The scum, Fred confirmed. So I doubled the bet that we'd win. I'm sure our Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw brothers are getting in on it. No doubt. What are they talking about? Katie asked. Unless the answer involves finding a bed to collapse in, I don't care, Angelina said, half asleep against her. On the positive side, Harry slept soundly the night before the game, if for no other reason that he didn't have any choice in the matter. On the negative side, the game itself quickly took a problematic turn when it became clear that one of the bludgers was hexed to go after Harry specifically. There was a heated debate during a timeout on if the Slytherins had hexed it, and how. Fred was pretty sure not even Donald would stoop that low. Katie questioned who could have done it, and Wood pointed out that the only person to have handled the balls was Madame Hooch. No one else could have gotten to them. Look, Harry said finally. At this rate, the only way I'll catch the snitch is if it flies up my sleeve. Leave me to deal with the bludger, okay? No one was okay with this, but it was either that or forfeit to Slytherin. Hence why they were all airborne moments later, with Harry having to dodge the bludger that did eventually succeed in breaking his arm. On the bright side, snatching the snitch right from above Malfoy's head was worth it, even if he didn't quite remember landing. When he came to, it was with the snitch in hand, Madame Hooch yelling about getting the bludger checked, Marcus Flint yelling at Malfoy, and Gilderoy Lockhart kneeling next to him. Definitely a problem with that last one. No, Harry squawked, backing away as best he could. Not you. Boy doesn't know what he's saying, Lockhart said to those assembled. Now hold still, Harry, he said, pulling out his wand. Snips immediately launched himself forward, wrapped his tail around Lockhart's wand, and flew off, yanking the wand clean out of his hand. Oh dear, stay right where you are. This is simple, reminds me of that one time in Athens. Harry waited until he was gone before struggling upright. Honestly, Harry, Professor Lockhart said to stay, Hermione said, as the twins helped him to his feet. Hermione, I don't know what he was planning on doing, but Snips not letting him was enough for me, Harry said. I'm going to the hospital wing. We'll go with you, Ron said, indicating himself and Hermione. Perfect, George said. Let's us watch the veggie pusher in action, Fred said, already going back to watching Snips play keep away, dodging into a bush before any of the approaching teachers could see. Professor McGonagall slowed to give the event a glance, poured on the speed when she saw Harry. I'm already going to the hospital wing, Professor, Harry said. Good, McGonagall said. Madame Pomfrey tutted through most of the bandaging and fixing up of Harry, at Quidditch in general and bludgers in particular. As Harry had expected, she had easily mended his arm. As he had also expected, she wanted him to stay overnight for observation. "Do I have to?" Harry couldn't help but ask. "Yes," she said, handing him a potion he recognized as a painkiller potion, even though he wasn't feeling poorly. "I'd rather you not strain that arm, and knowing Gryffindor parties, you would. Settle down, and rest assured no bludgers will be getting by me tonight." Harry wondered if Madame Pomfrey was a beater in another life. She did allow for a limited party before visiting hours finished up. Ron and Hermione, and the twins telling him how Snips had left Lockhart's wand up a tree, and how Lockhart had to climb it to get it. Hermione left him a book to read as Madame Pomfrey shooed them out, and the rest had left several sweets that the Mediwitch told him he could have after a sensible dinner first. Afterwards, Harry sat in his bed, reading the book that turned out to be on magical creatures, munching on a pumpkin pasty, and somewhat relieved that neither Bludgers nor Lockhart would be able to get past Madame Pomfrey. She was currently in the back sorting her potions, after politely declining his offer to help, citing his need for winding down for a restful night. Don't make her bring out the dreamless sleep, and assuring him that she had several spells on the doors and windows that would let her know if someone tried to break in. He was pleasantly surprised when Snips squeezed through a window a few pastries later to flit over to him. "I heard you put Lockhart's wand up a tree," Harry told him once he was on his usual perch of Harry's shoulder. Snip's response was to blow a small raspberry. "I hope Colin Creevy got photos. I'm sorry I missed that." Madame Pomfrey was over moments later, wand out, looked at the window at him, spotted Snips. "Ah, can't he stay, Madame Pomfrey?" Harry asked. "He's not doing anything, and he doesn't take up much space." Madame Pomfrey nodded, looking resigned. "No, past experience tells me he'd be right back if I sent him out." Point at Snips. "He gets to bed at a reasonable hour, understand?" Snips saluted, CRR Ed at Harry as she moved to extinguish the lights. 5 more minutes," Harry tried. Snips flashed sharp teeth, and Harry was very quick to relegate everything to the bedside table before diving under the sheets. Harry was woken up a few hours later by some very startled yelps. Sit up, grab his glasses, light a quick lumos with his wand to see Snips laying into Darby, diving and snapping at the poor house elf. "Hey, Snips," Harry yelped, jumping out of bed and tugging him off. "Darby, what are you doing here?" "Darby had to check on Harry Potter, sir. Darby told Harry Potter not to come to Hogwarts." Darby wailed. Harry debated shushing him, figured Madame Pomfrey would take a house elf better than Uncle Vernon had. "And I told you I couldn't let my friends be in danger. You're right, though. Something weird's been going on. The caretaker's cat got attacked. No one's sure by what." Watch Darby's reaction. "Whatever attacked her is what you're trying to warn me about, isn't it?" Darby trying to beat himself over the head with an empty bedpan was a good indication. "Darby, stop that," Harry hissed, taking the bedpan away. "Listen, what if I asked you questions, and you shake your head yes or no? Would that work?" Darby shook his head. "Darby just wants Harry Potter away from here. Darby thought Harry Potter would give up when he couldn't get on the platform. You sealed it. And then when Harry Potter made it to Hogwarts, Darby thought that his bludger would. You hexed the bludger to come after me?" Harry asked, stunned, looked at Snips. Snips pointed at the bedpan still in Harry's grasp, then at Darby. "Darby, you could have killed me, or got me expelled." Harry said, gesturing with the hand still holding the bedpan, figuring Snips wouldn't like flying around like that. Vaguely, he was aware he sounded like Hermione there, but still. "Darby didn't want to kill Harry Potter," Darby protested. "Just get Harry Potter away from danger, like with the Muggles." Harry froze, was aware of Snip's similar reaction. Darby, I would really appreciate not." Darby shook his head again. "Hogwarts won't allow for one of its students to be stolen, Harry Potter, sir. Not even by a well-meaning house elf, sir." Well, that was comforting. "But Darby, look. If you could just tell someone, or give us a better idea of what it is, anything, any little thing that doesn't involve hurting yourself," Harry said, snatching the bedpan away from Darby's reaching hands. "Some sort of clue or something. My friends and I can figure it out, Darby. Just give us a hint." Darby hesitated, ears suddenly perked up, vanished with a sharp crack. "Hey!" Harry barked, threw his arm over his eyes at the light. "Mr. Potter, I recall telling you to stay in bed." Harry blinked owlishly at Madame Pomfrey, standing there in her bathrobe with a lit wand and a cross expression. realized he still had a bedpan and Snips in his hands, put both down to point where Darby had been. "This wasn't my fault, ma'am. There was a house elf." Madame Pomfrey didn't dismiss him out of hand or react like Uncle Vernon, so Harry was counting this as a win. "I knew that someone came in here, but the Hogwarts house elves would know better than to bother a patient," she said, sending a few lights off to scan the area. Harry blinked at her. "Hogwarts has house elves." "Of course. Who do you think cleans the place and cooks the meals?" Honestly, until this very second he figured it was just magic. "I never saw any." "That's the mark of a good house elf," she told him, chivying him into bed. "Had a couple of the Weasley boys in here 1 year for exhaustion because they tried to stay up to see one." "Fred and George," Harry guessed as she summoned a mug of warm milk. "Yes." Eventually, they discovered that they could see as many house elves as they wanted if they went to the kitchens and asked for a snack. "Incidentally, you should too on occasion. You need some meat on your bones." Harry nodded, ignoring Snips' "see I told you" look, described Darby to Madame Pomfrey at her behest, jumped when she summoned another little house elf and told her about Darby. "I want you to keep an eye on Mr. Potter here for the night, and should another house elf come to bother Mr. Potter, I want you to detain him, okay, Mipsy?" Madame Pomfrey asked. "Yes, ma'am," the little house elf said brightly, saluting. "Good," Madame Pomfrey said, summoning a stool for Mipsy to sit on. "Mr. Potter, I expect you to be asleep again as soon as you finish your milk. Mipsy, make sure he does." "Yes, ma'am," came from two different sources. Madame Pomfrey nodded and headed back to bed. Once she was gone, Harry turned his attention to Mipsy. "You only make the second house elf I've ever met," Harry said. "I was wondering if it was okay if I asked you some questions." Mipsy nodded. "Only make sure you finish your milk, Mr. Potter, sir." "I'll do that while you're talking." "So, I kind of got a vague idea of what it is house elves do." Mipsy was very obliging in describing what the house elves did in Hogwarts, from cooking to cleaning, how certain teams handled certain areas and particular messes, how her specialty was making the fluffiest mashed potatoes and polishing the flagstones in the Great Hall. "You do a wonderful job," Harry said when she finished, putting his empty mug to the side. "Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Pass on my compliments to the others." Mipsy flushed and ducked her head, wringing her ears slightly. The action reminded Harry enough of Darby to make him ask his next question. Mipsy, you wouldn't happen to know why Darby is doing this?" he asked, explaining some of the things that had happened since he met the elf. Mipsy was still wringing her ears, this time in consternation instead of embarrassment. "Darby is not a Hogwarts house elf, which would be why he would be telling you Mr. Potter, sir," she said finally, after much thought. "And the rest of us would have heard something. Darby must belong to another family, and his behavior would mean that while his family didn't expressly forbid him, they don't want him warning others." Harry considered. "Is there no way to figure out who his family is?" Mipsy shook her head. "What about freeing him somehow? Is that not a good thing?" he asked, upon her scandalized expression. She shook her head. "Being freed is a mark of shame, Mr. Potter, sir. It means a house elf did such a terrible job that there is no other choice. We would lose our magic, wither away and die. Mr. Potter, sir. The only time a house elf would welcome freedom from their family would be if that family was dreadfully horrid for a long time. Consider, that would weaken the bonds enough for a house elf to reach out to someone else. But as I said, it would have to be a horrid family. Maybe that was why Darby helped him with Uncle Vernon. But Mr. Potter should be getting to sleep now, seeing as how you've finished your milk," Mipsy continued, making Harry's glass vanish. Harry nodded, bid her good night as he laid back down, catapulted upright as the doors banged open, Professor McGonagall calling for Madame Pomfrey. "Mr. Potter, stay in that bed," Madame Pomfrey said, blowing by him as Professor Dumbledore and Professor Flitwick came in, levitating. "Mr. Potter, sir." Mipsy yelped as he jumped out of bed and ran over. Madame Pomfrey said stay. "Mr. Potter, please," Professor McGonagall said, stopping him. "But that's Luna and Carlin," Harry gasped. "What happened? Are they okay?" "They seem to have suffered the same fate that Mrs. Norris has," Professor Dumbledore said, tugging Luna's spectrospecs off. "Which means they will recover." "Mr. Creevey might have taken a picture of his attacker," Professor Flitwick said, pointing out the camera a stunned Carlin had held in front of his face. "That would be very convenient," Professor Dumbledore said, peeling the camera from Carlin's frozen fingers and cracking it open. Alas, this is generally what happens when something would be too convenient. Harry covered his nose against the stench of burned film. Professors, Harry asked, is this? Dumbledore nodded gravely. It seems the Chamber of Secrets is open again, after all. Chapter 18, in which cauldrons explode. Chapter text Luna and Carlin's attacks spread through the school like wildfire. Anyone's best guess as to why they were out was a combination of hunting for Luna's shoes, visiting Harry in the hospital wing, and trying to get to the bottom of the mystery. Neville was distraught, but that was nothing compared to Ginny, who had to go to the hospital wing from a total nervous breakdown. Harry felt terrible too, from a combination of friends being attacked and the idea that they had been on their way to see him when it happened. It was why he was open to Hermione's proposed idea. "I'm sorry, what?" Ron asked. "Polyjuice potion," Hermione said. "Professor Slughorn was talking about it the other day. We can use it to infiltrate Slytherin and question Malfoy." "We're sure it's him, though?" Harry asked. They had already asked their Slytherin friends, and they seemed dismissive of the concept. Ron rolled his eyes. "Come on, Harry." He was practically giddy when the chamber was first opened. "And Slytherins all play close to the vest," Hermione said. "He might be doing it and none of them realize." Snips gave Harry a hard look, which Harry misinterpreted, apparently. "Fine," he said. "We'll do it. Where's the recipe?" Well, that's where we hit a little snag. Little snag being that the book the potion was in the restricted section. They debated on whether or not Slughorn would actually sign off on the book on the basis of further reading, decided that securing a signature from Lockhart would require less fuss. Mostly because, as Ron pointed out, Lockhart was more than willing to sign anything you handed to him. They had the book in Myrtle's bathroom a day later. "Those are not encouraging sounds," Ron pointed out, after a few minutes of Hermione muttering. "This is the most difficult potion I've seen," Hermione said, as Harry scooted over to read it. "Oh, those illustrations were horrible. And some of these ingredients won't be in the student stores. It'll take about a month to brew." "A month? Half the school will be petrified by then." "Well, if you have a better plan, we could just off Malfoy." "Ron." Harry sighed, glanced at Snips back at the book, recalled how horribly empty the extracurricular potions lab felt. "We'll do it," he announced. "If we come up with a better plan, we'll go for it, but right now this is our best bet. Let's do it." Stupid, idiot, dunderheaded, children, absolutely no sense at all. Snips was absolutely certain of three things. 1, that he was the best at potions, no questions asked. 2, that he knew what a person was thinking when they made eye contact. And 3, that Harry Potter and company absolutely could not stay out of trouble. When they weren't being ambushed by it, they were merrily hunting it down, only pausing to pick up a helping of treacle tart on their way. But of course, trying to tell them this was beyond him, seeing as how they didn't speak in chirps, so he fell back on his usual way of telling them he did not approve at all, nipping Harry on the chin. "Ow, sorry, Snips," Harry said, obviously not certain what he did, but apologizing anyway. Snips chirped, letting him know that he accepted the apology anyway, and then held on as they ignored him and went and approached this conundrum in the most stupid and reckless way possible. That is, brewing and ingesting polyjuice potion. Even worse, Hermione was the one to suggest this, and she was the sensible one. But at the very least, since they were bound and determined to do this, he'd go along with it and make sure they didn't do it wrong. That would just be mean. But that certainly didn't mean he'd let them get away with it. Snips wasn't helping them in potions class again, which was to be expected, nor was he willing to help them sabotage Malfoy's cauldron. Ron and Harry had tried very hard to come up with a distraction that would work, and while Ron thought that maybe tossing a firecracker in Malfoy's cauldron would work, he certainly deserved it, after trying to sabotage theirs all their first year. Harry thought that maybe faking an attack would do it. "I don't think so, mate," Ron said. "You do that, Malfoy will never let you hear the end of it." Snips CRR edit that. "Careful," Harry told Snips. "If I don't do it, we go with Ron's plan of tossing a firecracker into Malfoy's cauldron." Snips snipped first Harry's chin and then Ron's chin before flying over to the shelves and rummaging through them. "What is he doing?" Ron muttered. "I have no idea," Harry admitted. "Maybe he decided to help us with our potions again." "Is there a problem, boys?" Harry and Ron yelped as they spun around to see Professor Slughorn standing before them. No, 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 Professor, why would you think there was a problem? Ron asked quickly, trying to find a nonchalant pose and failing. Well, you both were staring at the shelves, trying to find a way to fix your potions. Professor Slughorn asked, looking at both their cauldrons. Harry, perhaps you'd like to have a guess at how to fix yours first. Harry noised, staring at his potion. If he kept Professor Slughorn's attention, then not only would he not discover Snips, then Hermione might have a chance to sneak into the stores. Gah, why hadn't he loaned her his cloak first? Ah, well, looking back at my textbook, Harry said, scanning the recipe quickly. I think I added too much ground lavender, read teaspoon as tablespoon. A common mistake, Professor Slughorn said. Remember to always read the recipe carefully. Right, and come on, he had been studying potions and been working with Mrs. Weasley with those household potions. Surely between Snips and her, something would stick. And that caused my potion to turn this puce color. Ron leaned over and looked. Oh, that's puce, he said quietly, with the air of someone who had always heard of the color but had no idea what it looked like. Right, and he glanced up, saw Snips in the rafters with several sprigs of different plants in one of his tiny claws. And Better Potions and Tonics, I read it over the summer, suggests that when there's too much lavender, wormhood helps to balance it out. Very good, Professor Slughorn said. And how much wormhood would you have to add? Snips was crumbling up the plants in his claws. Ron glanced to see what he was looking at, but Professor Slughorn must have thought he was racking his brain. Which, by the way, he was. I added a tablespoon when I should have added a teaspoon. That's 3 times the amount I should have, and you add a quarter teaspoon of wormhood to 1 teaspoon of lavender, because too much makes the potion bitter, so 3/4 of a teaspoon. That's absolutely correct, Professor Slughorn said. 10 points to Gryffindor for puzzling that out, Harry. You'll find the wormhood on the top shelf there. Best get a ladder, or see if someone will help you. Don't climb on the shelves. Had a first year do that, and it didn't end well. Now, Mr. Weasley, Professor Slughorn continued, moving to Ron's cauldron. Can you tell me how to fix your potion? Ron noised. Well, my potion is, what is this color? Teal, Harry said, glancing at it before moving to the shelves, watching Snips frantically. He had drizzled the plants into Malfoy's cauldron while he was watching Professor Slughorn quiz them and had climbed back down to the shelves. Teal, okay, and it turned that color after adding the goshawk talon trimmings, and it was supposed to turn a clear blue, Ron said, reading out of his recipe book. So I might have read it wrong. Teaspoons again, Malfoy called jeeringly. Ron's ears turned red. Now, as I said, a common mistake, Professor Slughorn said. Did you add too much or too little? I think I added too little, Ron muttered. What are you doing? Harry hissed at Snips, who had now lifted the lid on a jar and was scooping several handfuls of powder into a leaf. Snips hissed back before bundling up the leaf and scurrying into the rafters again. Well, that's usually an easy fix, Professor Slughorn said. But it's been simmering a while, so you need to add a stabilizing agent. What do you add, Mr. Weasley? Now Ron's whole face was red as he struggled to think. He had not been as interested in potions as Harry had gotten, preferring more practical spells with immediate results and learning how to fly a broom, and had therefore not pored over his mother's potions books to wind down evenings. Malfoy was laughing. Professor Slughorn looked like he was getting ready to turn around and tell him to hush, and Snips looked like he was about to drop his little bundle into the cauldron. And if that happened, Slughorn would see it and naturally look up and spot Snips. Harry had to do something, so he shot his hand up. Yes, Harry. Did you need help finding the stepladder? Yes, sir, but I think I read that, phosphite is a good stabilizer, sir. I remember because, when I was still going to Muggle school, that we covered a little bit of chemistry, and it struck me as kind of odd that chemistry and potions uses the same stabilizers. Slughorn nodded, and Malfoy looked like he was about to comment, but at that moment Snips, who had been watching Harry intently, glanced back down, saw Malfoy, and chose that moment to shove his little bundle off the rafter and into Malfoy's cauldron. The effect was immediate. Whatever Snips had been doing to Malfoy's cauldron on the sly caused it to explode mightily, as effective as any firecracker, splashing Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle and quite a few others in the immediate vicinity. Slughorn, who had jumped back in alarm at the sudden noise, quickly rushed forward, performing a vanishing charm on the mess on the floor so he could get to his students. My word, I've never seen a potion do that. Did someone lob something in here? Never mind. Everyone who was hit with the potion, forward to my desk. I have the antidote handy in case of such accidents, but never have I seen it go like that. Harry stared for the longest time before a sharp nip to his jaw brought his attention sharply back. That was brilliant, Harry hissed to Snips, back on his shoulder and in his hiding spot. I thought you weren't going to help. Snips turned up his beak, apparently deciding that he was still going to punish Harry by ignoring him. Bloody, Ron breathed, too taken by the carnage to finish his statement. Ron, Harry hissed, snapping his friend back to attention. Give me a hand here. I can't reach the wormhood and you still need Phosphite. Right, Ron said, wandering back to the shelves while still watching everything. Snips did that, Harry nodded. You get first dibs on my supper, Ron whispered to Harry's shoulder, figuring Snips was there. Whatever you like, choicest cut or whatever, pumpkin pasties. Snips clicked his beak at that but refused to comment further. But even better, he saw Hermione ducking out of the storeroom and slinking back to her cauldron. She ducked out of sight for a moment, putting the pilfered ingredients into her book bag, perhaps, before popping back up, glancing around before giving them a discreet thumbs-up, which he returned. Success. Chapter 19, in which rumors start. After text, no further attacks occurred the next few weeks, which made Harry question the necessity of the polyjuice potion. But they were committed. They were moving forward with this no matter what. Hermione was taking point on the potion, Harry assisting, Snips sitting on his head and supervising everything, and stopping them at critical points when the risk arose. Ron with them, and offering emotional support. On this front, at least, everything was going smoothly. In the rest of the castle, not so much. People were gathering in groups and gossiping in whispered tones, which in and of itself was not noteworthy. People gossiped all the time. What made him notice these particular times was when they glanced at him, although he couldn't fathom why. There's a rumor going round that you're the heir of Slytherin, Ross Ambrose told him at the next Slug Club when Harry asked if he had heard anything. Utter rubbish, in my opinion, even if it does reduce the looks we've been getting. I mean, you're in Gryffindor. Harry nodded, stopped when something occurred to him. Well, I was almost in Slytherin. Ross and Ernie Macmillan, who was in the seat on Ross's other side, stopped, stared at him. How do you almost be in Slytherin? Ernie asked. Well, the Sorting Hat said I'd be good in there, but I didn't really want to, you see. Should I be offended? Ross asked. Well, to be fair, I mean I'm not sure how well you know Malfoy. Say no more, Ross said, holding a hand up and going back to his chips. The next thing of note was a post on the boards announcing the start of a dueling club, which was something Harry would much rather focus on than potions and rumors. This was a shared sentiment, as it seemed that most of the school was crowded into the great hall on Saturday. I wonder who's going to be teaching it, Ron said, better able to see above the crowd than Harry or Hermione. I heard Flitwick used to duel, just so long as it's not, oh no. Harry grimaced in agreement at the sight of Professor Lockhart stepping up onto the raised stage in place of the high table, Professor Flitwick following. Can everyone see me? Can everyone hear me? Good, Professor Lockhart said, smiling at them. Now, with all the fuss circulating about the castle, like we're all bothered over nothing, Ron muttered. Professor Flitwick and I have organized this little dueling club for those who want to learn how to better defend themselves. Don't worry, I'll make sure you still have a charms teacher by the end. Professor Flitwick was smiling and nodding, but it was the sort of smiling and nodding that didn't match up to what the person was thinking currently. At this point, Harry had the feeling they should be more concerned about not having a defense teacher by the end of the club. Now today we're going to be covering the disarming charm, Professor Flitwick announced, also smiling at the students, a more sincere smile than the one he gave Lockhart. A wizard's wand is his weapon. Take away the wand, and you have effectively stopped your opponent. Most of the time, Lockhart said, looking like he was warming up for one of his stories. Yes, most of the time, Flitwick said, cutting him off before he could get started. There are instances of wizards who can easily do wandless magic, but that is very advanced, and most of you will probably not be going up against such a character. Thus, the disarming charm is a simple but effective spell that will work about 95% of the time. And to demonstrate, we will also be showing you how to conduct yourself in a duel, Lockhart announced. First, face your opponent, bow nice and deep. Then turn, pace away, turn again, wand at the ready now. Expelliarmus, Flitwick said, before Lockhart could bring his wand down. Lockhart went flying, as did his wand, which resulted in a clean split on audience opinion. Think he's all right? Hermione asked in the first group. Who cares? Harry and Ron asked, applauding and cementing themselves in the second group. Ah, yes. Has anyone got my wand? Thank you, Perkins, Lockhart said, getting back up to the stage. Good show, Phileas, although I could have stopped it. With a shield charm which we can cover next week, Flitwick said, still with that bland smile. Ah, yes, yes, capital idea. Now, everyone in pairs practice what we just showed you, disarm only. Hermione tugged on Harry and Ron's sleeves. Now's our chance to get the hairs we need from the Slytherins, she told them. Pair up with Crabbe and Goyle. I'll see if I can't get Bulstrode. Wait, Harry said. We'll be like 10 feet from each other. Hermione rolled her eyes. Bold of you to assume they'll play fair. Which was an unfortunate truth where Malfoy's gang was concerned. Harry yelped at getting jerked back. Ah, so his thoughts had the unfortunate side effect of summoning the person involved. You and me, Potter, Malfoy spat. Right now. Ah, Harry noised, eyes flicking to Crabbe and Goyle. What, not scared, are you? Harry's attention immediately snapped back to Malfoy. You wish. Ron nodded, sized up Crabbe and Goyle, settled on Crabbe. Let's you and me fight. Boys, Hermione muttered, slipping off in search of her target. Resolving that they'd figure out a way to get to Goyle later, Harry marched with Malfoy to the markers on the floor as everyone separated to their own duels. Match poses, tilt just enough to qualify as a bow. Harry's back was prickling as he marched away, self-preservation, and a warning chirp from Snips had him ducking as he spun around, dodging the stinging hex Malfoy aimed at him, which hit Terence Redley from Ravenclaw instead, which prompted him to spin around. Disarm, I said disarm only, Lockhart hollered. Too late. Those who had actually listened were quickly scattering to the walls as those who didn't devolved into a fight. Harry shot Flipendo back at Draco, who countered with a tickling hex, got hit by a Jellylegs jinx. Professor Flitwick was over and cancelling the spells. 5 points from each of you boys, he announced. Now try that again, and disarm only. Harry nodded, face flushing. Draco was red too, as Flitwick told them to bow more deeply. Come now, Mr. Malfoy, I know you can do better than that, pace away. Harry still ducked when he spun around, but he shot a disarming spell at Malfoy this time. And because he did, Malfoy's spell went over his head. Very good, Mr. Potter, Flitwick said brightly. Mr. Malfoy, on your next attempt aim for the body. It makes for a larger target and still gets the job done. Mr. Potter, try extending a leg when you duck like that, as you make it difficult to dodge a second spell. Professor Flitwick stood there watching their next several attempts, giving pointers or complimenting where proper, finally drifted away to help the next pair of duelists. As soon as he did so, Harry and Malfoy locked eyes, Malfoy's eyes darting to Flitwick repeatedly, calculating how far away he needed to be for them to resume their first duel. Harry's arm stiffened, ready to disarm him. Malfoy was a hair faster. Serpensortia. Harry dove away, not recognizing the spell, rolled up from his tumble to come face to face with a snake. Ah, he squeaked, scuttling backwards. The snake slithered after him. What did we say about disarming spells only? Flitwick called, hustling over. I'll handle it, Phileas, Lockhart called, pointed his wand at the snake. Voler ascent. No, wait. Harry's opinion of Lockhart's spell was that it wasn't designed to get rid of the snake per se, just make it the neighbor's problem. The snake was understandably upset at being thrown up about 50 feet into the air and then landing hard on the flagstones. It was hissing and spitting, angry and wanting a target, shot right at Justin Finch-Fletchley. No, wait, Harry yelped, hand outstretched like he could stop it so far away. Stop. To everyone's surprise, the snake did indeed screech to a halt and spun around to look at him with an expression that smacked of seriously. And then the snake was gone, banished properly by Professor Flitwick, who looked at Harry with concern. Actually, everyone was. Ah, Harry noised, was bodily hauled out of there by Ron, Hermione hot on their heels. Wait, where are we going? Harry asked, the great hall exploding with voices behind them. Ron didn't answer until they were in an empty classroom. You're a Parslimouth. Harry blinked, not quite sure if he was being insulted or not. I'm a what? Parslimouth. Ron repeated, throwing his hands up. You can talk to snakes. Oh, Harry noised. Okay. What do you mean, okay, Harry? I mean, it's not like it's a surprise. Harry protested. I talked to a boa constrictor at the zoo once. I bet loads of wizards can do it. You talked. I can't. Hermione talk to him. Hermione waved Ron off as he paced away, a hand to his head. Being a parsley-tongue is a rare gift, Harry, and not one associated with good wizards. Harry felt some of the blood drain from his face. UHH, how bad is. You know who? Salazar Slytherin. It's why the house symbol is a snake. And then, Ron said, pacing back to them, and then you do that right in front of the whole school. Everyone's going to think you're like his great-great-grandkid or something. But I stopped the snake from attacking Justin, Harry protested. That's got to count for something, doesn't it? Is that what you told it? Ron asked. All I heard was a bunch of hissing. It kind of sounded like you were egging it on, Hermione said gingerly, and with everything going on, Harry barely registered Snips patting his cheek. I'm doomed, aren't I? Ron put a hand on his shoulder, nodded sagely. Yes. Ron was not exaggerating. By Sunday breakfast, everyone knew that one Harry Potter was a parcel-tongue. By Sunday lunch, everyone had an opinion on it. By Monday morning, Harry was wondering on the efficacy of wearing his invisibility cloak everywhere. It didn't help that literally everyone was side-eyeing him. Even Lockhart had cooled off considerably. And if the Quidditch team talked about him, it was usually to refer to him as the Seeker. And let's not get started on how the other students were treating him. So he wasn't entirely surprised when Fergus pinned him, not physically, fortunately, in the hall one day, followed by Fred and George. I'm having a need to get to the bottom of the rumors circulating, Fergus told him. What's this I hear about you being the heir of Slytherin? I'm not, Harry insisted. I'm not even in Slytherin. Ah, but I heard from Ross you almost were. Day after dueling club, he says no wonder the Hat wanted to put him in Slytherin. Ah, but think about it, Fred said, a hand up. Harry had been hoping they were hovering around to keep Fergus from possibly doing something untoward. If the heir of Slytherin were in Slytherin, it would be too obvious. And the best way to avoid suspicion would to be in another house, George added. And not just any house. The house Slytherins despise above all. A double reverse. Well played, Harry. Very cunning. That is, actually, Fergus agreed. But I'm not the heir of Slytherin, Harry protested. Good, Harry, keep insisting on innocence. That's key to pulling off a good scheme, Fred said, giving him a thumbs up. And if you let anyone else in on it, make sure you've all got your stories straight, George added. I mean, it's all right for us being quintuplets. We've got that innate sense of what the others are doing, but still. Very true, Fergus agreed, handing Harry a small bag. So this is for you. What is it? Harry asked. Your cut. I might be selling charms and such, protecting people from you. Also, here's a list. If you could avoid these people, that'd be great. Really sell it. Thanks, Harry. We really need to get Donald talking to that man, Fred said. Yes, George agreed. Possibly to hire him. He's going places. Noticed Harry's expression. Oh, come off it, Harry. We don't think you're really the heir. And if you keep taking it so seriously, you're just going to make yourself sick. Hence us doing our best to get your mind off of things and view this as the joke it really is. That would explain why they kept making a point to run in front of him in the halls, going make way for the heir of Slytherin. I do want to know more about this boa constrictor you chatted up, though, George added. You know how you talk to things to get your mind off of something else? Harry asked. It was like that. I just wasn't expecting it to talk back. Yes, that always is a shock. It is, Fred said, before looking at the nearby vase. Don't you agree? It's why myself, and the podium I'm sitting on has a permanent sticking charm now, the vase responded. Reflecting on it, Harry wasn't entirely certain why a talking vase surprised him. After all, it was Hogwarts. Chapter 20, in which minor breakdowns and major fights happen. Chapter text: Harry's social experiences did not improve as the week wore on, nor did it improve during the week after, or the week after that. He finally did resort to wearing his invisibility cloak while in the library, which left Ron and Hermione a little frustrated at basically talking to thin air. Hermione in particular thought he was being very silly. Honestly, Harry, hiding from everyone is only going to make it worse. Kind of have to agree, Ron said, not looking up from his astronomy homework. If people don't see you, they might think you're off in the chamber plotting with your snake buddies. Being the focus of all that negative attention is just draining, all right. Harry sighed, glanced at Snips huffing. Don't you start. I mean, I do get it. It's why we're going forward with this whole Polyjuice thing. When will that be ready? Right in time for Christmas break, Hermione said. It'll be perfect. Almost everyone's going home, so there'll be less people to question us while we're in disguise. I'm still not sold on Essence of Neville. Neville had not been in the running for this, which alerted Harry to the fact that Neville had come over, still looking dour. Would you like to sit with us, Neville? Right, there's free, Hermione said, pointing to a chair. Thanks, Neville said, sitting down. Where's Harry? Harry's currently hiding from the angry mob, thinking he's the heir, Ron supplied. Oh. I mean, I guess I would too. Blink, where though? I just came from our dorm. Right here, Neville, Harry said, pushing the invisibility cloak off a little. I was just getting really tired of the stairs. I guess I can get that, Neville said, took a deep breath, obviously bracing himself. And I don't think you did it. Harry, Luna, and Colin are our friends. Thanks, Neville, Harry said, stuffing the invisibility cloak in his bag. Just frustrating. For everyone who does, believe me, it's like there's two that don't, and those people are just really open about glaring. It's not that bad, Harry, Hermione stressed. In response, Harry pulled out the list that Fergus had given him. What is this? Hermione asked, looking it over. A list of people Fergus McDougal asked me to avoid, Harry said, aware that his neck was pinking, because they bought charms to ward against me. Ron snitched the paper, scanned it. Justin Finch Fletchley. What of course he did. He still figures you set that snake on him. What are you going to do, Harry? Neville asked. Harry shrugged. I really don't know. If I confront anyone on this, they'll just see it as guilt. Well, you hiding could be construed as guilty as well, Hermione said, snapping a book shut. I say we approach this proactively. I saw Ernie Macmillan in here earlier. We can talk to him about talking to Justin. Talking to Ernie was a bit awkward, considering he was in a study group. What's he doing here? One of the other students asked, indicating Harry. Doesn't he have a monster to go consort with? I'll leave him alone, Neville said, fists balling. Harry isn't the heir, and he certainly wouldn't attack his friends. He's not even in Slytherin. See, that was my point, one of the girls said. He was almost a Slytherin, the first student insisted. Oi, lay off, the lot of you, Ernie said, closing his book and standing up. Let's go talk over here, he told the second years. Careful, Ern, you might be next. Before you comment, I shared that before the whole thing with the snake, and you didn't give me the impression you wanted it kept secret, Ernie told Harry once they were out of earshot. I was almost in Ravenclaw, Hermione piped up. I don't see what the big deal about almost is. You can't talk to eagles if you want a straight comparison. That we know of, Ron pointed out. That's true. Ernie turned back to Harry. And I don't see it, not with Luna and Colin. So what did you want, Harry? If it's talking people down, I've been trying that. It's about Justin, Harry started. I can't get him to agree to a face-to-face, Harry. Then can you at least tell him that I was telling the snake to stop? I didn't even realize I was speaking some other language until Ron and Hermione told me. Ernie had a blank look now. How can you speak a different language without realizing it? Harry didn't know and said so. But you can at least talk to Justin, right? He asked. I'll see what I can do. That was the most Harry could ask of him, honestly, and he spent the next couple of days at least trying to go about his day without hiding underneath the invisibility cloak. As Ron and Hermione insisted, not being seen was more suspicious than being seen. But at least not being seen had the added benefit of not being glared at, of not being yelled at, of not being badgered and heckled, and all but hexed and punched, no matter how many times teachers came down on the offending students. It was really a lot to ask of a 12-year-old, and it was getting to the point that he was pretty sure he was approaching something resembling a total nervous breakdown. Having someone, at Gryffindor table, at that, Hex's dinner to explode all over him was what got him there. Dripping soup, trying to keep from crying. At least with the Dursleys he had been able to get away from them. Here there was always someone glaring at him, and he had finally reached the end of his rope. And he was not going to start sobbing. He was not. Fred and George ran in from the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff tables, tackling someone with the help of Lee Jordan, all of them yelling. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff rushed the table. Not sure what was going on, but seeing their colors attacking Gryffindor, and everyone was super tense, and Fred and George tackling, whoever was the straw that broke the camel's back. Ron and Hermione tried to get him out of there, but someone grabbed Ron, and then Neville jumped on whoever had Ron, and the Slytherin table was cheering on the chaos. Once again, Dumbledore employed volume to restore order, pretty impressive volume held at length, to cut across the noise bouncing around the hall and the ringing in Harry's ears. Everyone who was injured, to the hospital wing, Dumbledore ordered. Everyone else to their dorms. Tomorrow your respective heads of houses will assign detentions and deduct points as they see fit. Come on, Harry, Hermione said, tugging on his arm gently. We'll go get you cleaned up. Someone elbowed Harry hard in the back, which set off the whole fight again for another 2 minutes before the adults could restore order. Dumbledore had to finally resort to an immobulus charm, which left Harry half picking himself up until he dispelled the charm a few minutes later. "Ere now awry, up ye get," Hagrid said, having effectively waded through the fighting kids and hauling him upright. "Juice, a spill, darn fret. I'm—" He couldn't get the lie out. Hogwarts had gone from warm and welcoming to openly hostile, and he couldn't bring himself to handle being the concentrated focus of so much ire. "Don't worry, Harry, we'll escort you back to the dorm," Fred said, coming around Hagrid's side. Snips was riding on his shoulder, flitted to Harry's, started chittering. "Let those lions know we know where they live," George said, and the veggie pusher just about ate up Cormac's nose. That was impressive. "You worry me, to be fair," Fred said to Snips. "You ridiculous lot prefects, escort this group to the dorm," McGonagall called, moving her arm in a large circle to indicate them. "Hagrid, could you go with them? As for the rest of you, I am ashamed of you." Hagrid ushered them out, Harry dimly hearing Slughorn telling the other heads of houses he'd be sending upcoming droughts to their houses later. Some of the kids might need them. "Are you okay, Harry?" Hermione asked, keeping a hand on his arm. "No," he answered thickly, looked up morosely at his friends, noted the state of Ron's face. "Ron, shouldn't you be?" "I'll go tomorrow," Ron said. "Or maybe we'll have to lean on Gred and Forge to patch you up. They're good for that," Fred offered. "If you trust them to do it, that is," George added. "I trust Fred and George more than Donald," Ron said dully. "That's true. Shame on Donald not jumping in." "It'll be fine, Harry," Hermione assured him. "They'll find out who's been doing this and everything will calm back down." Considering they ran into Justin, Ernie, and nearly headless Nick, all petrified, on the way back up to the dorm, Harry very much doubted it. Chapter 21, in which Harry gets counseled. Chapter text: Harry spent the entirety of his time, not in class, under his invisibility cloak after that. Despite it being obvious he couldn't have done it, since everyone had seen him at dinner when it happened, there was still a heavily vocal group who circulated that it made sense that Justin got attacked, and Ernie had been singled out by Harry in the library, and Harry just had a legitimately awful time after that, to the point that when he was called into the headmaster's office, he figured it was to get expelled. Dumbledore's bird catching on fire really cemented that feeling. "Ah, Harry, Professor." Harry blurted, panicking at the sight of Dumbledore coming down the steps. I couldn't. He just caught fire." "Yes, about time too. He's been looking dreadful for days." "Ah," he noised, seeing Harry's confusion. "Fox is a phoenix, Harry. Come here, have a look, see," he asked, indicating the wrinkly little head poking out of the ashes. "Marvelous creatures, phoenixes. Their tears have healing powers. They can lift burdens vastly greater than they weigh, and when they die they burst into flame and are reborn from the ashes. Incidentally, you should come back a few days later. Phoenixes grow up quickly, but for about 3 or 4 days he's rather adorable with his fluff. Alas, this is not the reason I summoned you here." Harry's heart sunk at that. "Please, Professor, don't expel me. I didn't attack anyone. I'm not the heir." "My dear boy," Dumbledore said, handing him a cup of tea, "I have a list of suspects as to this heir of Slytherin business, and it might disappoint you to know that you did not make the list. No, I called you up here because it's come to my attention that, out of all of us, this unfortunate year has been weighing on you quite heavily." He indicated a seat for Harry, took one of his own. "I understand that Muggle schools employ counseling when their students get stressed, and I was wondering if this would work as well for Hogwarts. You just happened to get one of the first slots, although I must apologize for experimenting on you. This is new for me as well." "Sir," Harry noised, a little confused. "Our lovely Muggle studies professor was nice enough to write down what to do, although the main point she told me to focus on was to create a safe, calming space. At that, Dumbledore looked up from the parchment he was consulting and took in the room. Although between the state of the various devices and you catching Fawkes on a burning day, I feel like I might be failing in that regard. You're doing fine, sir, Harry assured him, hesitated. So I'm not expelled. No, Harry, I've not found a reason to do so, and considering your grades, your track record, and the lack of complaint from your teachers, I doubt I will find one, barring some tremendous act that breaks several dozen school rules, Dumbledore said, consulting the parchment again. Considering Fred and George Weasley's current record is 27 and they're still attending, you would have to come up with something rather earth-shaking indeed. Oh, Harry noised, feeling faint from relief. Yes, unfortunately, when people are afraid, they seek out scapegoats. I wish I could tell you that this is an infrequent occurrence, but alas, this is not so. I might recommend you avoid a career in politics if this isn't your fancy. Harry nodded, finally sipped at his tea. I will have to ask Professor Burbage for more information on this, Dumbledore muttered after a few minutes. I confess the School of Psychology wasn't what it is today when I went to school. But I must also confess that most fields weren't the same today as when I went to school, he confided, smiling at Harry with twinkling eyes. Harry couldn't help but return the smile. Ah, good, Harry. You're much too young to be bearing the world on your shoulders. It's why older people tend to be stoop-backed. This, I think, will have to be brought up at the next teachers' meeting, he decided, putting the paper to the side. Although it gives us two options for conversation, we either address whatever's bothering you, or we studiously avoid such topics and instead discuss things as to decompress. Your choice, Harry. There was a lot bothering him, but just thinking about it was enough to make a cold sweat start up his back. If it's all the same to you, Professor, I'd rather avoid the topics. Very well, Harry. Have you tried the biscuits yet? The jammy Dodgers are strawberry-flavored, he offered, holding the plate out for Harry to sample. They're my new addiction, although I suppose I could have worse. Incidentally, did anything come of the tapestry on the 5th floor? Harry reported that they had yet to find anything, but that Neville had found a fake wall by accident one day. He had sagged against it, only to find it wouldn't support his weight. Dumbledore nodded, lamented the fact that this whole year had been a poor one for extracurricular exploration, asked if he had been enjoying his classes this year. All except defense, Harry confided. I'm not really sure what we're learning. And history, but... Dumbledore nodded. History is a lot less dull when you're in the middle of making it, but even then I find I still get the dates mixed up. Harry did feel a lot better when Dumbledore finally thought he had taken up enough of his time and told him so on the way back to the dorm. Ah, so this might work after all, Dumbledore said brightly. I shall have to inform the other teachers so we can set up schedules. Harry nodded, hesitated. Sir, what do I do about the other students? A very difficult question, Harry, very difficult. Oftentimes, facing down an angry mob is nothing less than terrifying, for trying to counter them is you wasting your breath. Not answering them is cowardice, and trying to fight back puts you in the wrong. Desperately tricky no matter the age. Silence as he pondered this. I would say it's best to face it with your head held high, but I must also confess that it's been a very long time since I've been 12. If you need to retreat to gather yourself, then I recommend you do so. I'm sure if you ask a teacher nicely, you can duck in while they grade papers. Harry wasn't sure about that, but thanked him anyway before going into the dorm room and then ducking his head as he went to the corner where Ron and Hermione were. It's okay, she assured him. Just a few more weeks, then we can get to the bottom of all this. I can't wait, Ron said fervently before standing and shaking his fist. You don't got something better to do. I'll take all of you on. Me too, Neville shot. We've lost enough house points. Everyone focus on your homework, Percy said loudly, when nobody moved. I have spent most of my life in the company of Fred and George Weasley. You will not survive an altercation with me. Everyone went back to their studies. Now why did it work for you and not me? Ron demanded of Percy. I've spent my entire life with Fred and George. Percy's expression was smug as he rubbed his prefect badge. You have to have one of these, Ron. Harry considered his options the next morning, finally consulted Snips. What do you think? He asked the little thing. Go without the invisibility cloak and try to take the high road, or stick with the current plan. Snips pondered it for a few beats before tugging an edge of the invisibility cloak over. That's what I thought too. Harry did take Dumbledore's advice, though, insofar as sticking his head into an available teacher's office and asking if he could study in there worked. This had the added bonus of having someone knowledgeable available if he had questions, and he was pretty sure it also doubled as them ruling him out as the heir. With teachers like Flitwick and Slughorn, this also came with the addition of biscuits and tea. So the only downside Harry had found thus far was that he wasn't spending time with his friends. "This business is absolutely dreadful," Slughorn lamented one day, pausing in his paper grading to drink some tea. "I remember the last time the chamber opened. Had to be a good 50 years ago now, as terrifying then as it is now." "I think Hagrid told me something about that," Harry said. "I think he said someone died." "Yes, dreadful business. Myrtle Warren, she was terribly picked on back then. She was hiding in a bathroom stall after one of her classmates teased her for her glasses when the monster got her." Pause, as though drawing a correlation between her and Harry. "Ah, Harry, promise me you won't go skulking off in the castle by yourself." "I won't, Professor," Harry assured him, thinking that that hadn't been helping people but understanding his concern. "And I know this sounds kind of odd, but please don't tell Professor Lockhart I did my homework in your office." It was a request he had been making of all the teachers, and every time he got the same response, a nod and an understanding noise. "I don't understand it," Slughorn sighed. "I remember teaching Gilderoy, dab hand at charms, but not defense. I suppose he must have been a late bloomer." Harry didn't know enough to say for certain, and decided to help himself to another biscuit instead. But finally, Christmas break was upon them. The castle was all but deserted thanks to the recent attacks. A ghost being affected had spooked everyone, no pun intended, and it meant that Harry was once again a free man. "Good to see you again, Harry," George said on the first day of break. "Hello, George. Hello, Fred," Harry greeted. "You two are staying over the holidays too." "Showing solidarity for our fellow Weasleys," Fred said, a hand to his chest. "Although I don't know about Edmund, Hubert, or Donald." "Donald probably went to visit Bill with Mum and Dad," George said pensively. "That bloke won't miss a chance to learn a new curse. Hubert would probably go because Hufflepuffs find things, and Edmund wouldn't pass up the opportunity to learn something new. So it's just the two of us," Fred and George agreed. "Eventually they'll realize they have other siblings," Ron offered, patting a spot on the rug and offering a toasted marshmallow on a stick. "Ah, right," Fred said, pointing. "Eichel Ranikins. And Percy's staying for teacher solidarity," George mused as Harry sat down, Snips flitting down to his knee. "Although I don't know what Ginny's reason is, we told her getting away from the castle would be good for her. We also told her the mummies would come to life. That might be it." "It might also be that she didn't want to ride the train by herself," Percy said, flicking them both in the back of the head before settling in an ottoman by the window, where thick flakes of snow drifted by. "You'll have to ask her when she comes down." That settled, they turned back to toasting breakfast. Fred and George had procured the food from somewhere, Harry suspected house elves, letting Ginny and Hermione into their little circle and giving Percy a sausage on a stick to nibble on while he read. In all, very cozy, and for the first time in over a month, Harry finally felt that nasty, tangled ball in his chest ease. For now, at least, things were going well. Chapter 22, in which Harry and Ron Slytherin. Chapter text: Christmas morning dawned bright and snowy, and with Hermione waking them by dint of introducing presents to their faces. "Wake up," she barked, ignoring Ron's groaning. "I've been up for hours already, adding lacewings to the potion. It's ready." Harry sat up so quickly he dislodged Snips, sending him rolling off the pillow with a yeep. "It is. It looks just like the book says it should," she said. "Now all we need to do is get the bits of the people we need, and make sure they're not going to stumble in on us while we're grilling Malfoy." Harry could agree that would be problematic. "So who are you getting, then?" Ron asked blearily, yawning broadly before scrubbing at his face. "I already got mine," Hermione said brightly, producing a small vial. "Remember during dueling club when Millicent Bulstrode had me in the headlock?" "Was this before or after Professor Flitwick broke up mine and Malfoy's duel the first time?" Harry asked. "Kind of during. She left this on my robes, and she's gone home for the holidays. I'll just tell people I decided to come back. I suppose we can nail them during the Christmas feast, Ron offered. In the meantime, presents. Harry was quite pleased with the presents this year, mostly because he was still new to the idea of getting actual presents. His usual sort of present from the Dursleys kind of cemented the difference, and that he should be questioning it more. He mused, examining the toothpick they had given him with a lot less of a disparaging look than Snips and Hedwig, who had delivered it along with Neville's gift, were giving it. I mean, I guess I could use it to pick locks, Harry mused, putting it aside. Or knitting. You guys didn't. It was a very lovely tea-cozy Harry, Hermione assured him. I love the color, Ron agreed, holding his up. It was fuzzy and aggressively orange. I think I'm going to have to give up on hats for now, Harry sighed. Try scarves, mate. They're like long rectangles. Neville gave him an all-in-one pocket pruning shear, with a note that he wasn't entirely certain what Harry would use it for outside herbology, while Hagrid got him some treacle tart, and Hermione got him a color-coded binder that was bigger on the inside, for keeping your homework organized. Ron gets one too. Mrs. Weasley also gave him some food and a new sweater, and for Snips, a new tiny scarf and small trapper hat that he was able to tie under his chin. Those were wrapped in a little note that said that she had a better idea of what to make Snips now that she saw him. Although the mittens were giving her some trouble, she confided that she might have to resort to knitting them full-sized and then shrinking them. She also told Harry he was welcome to come back next summer, which warmed him as much as the sweater did. The Christmas feast was interesting. Since there really wasn't enough people per house to even fill one table, 3 of them had vanished along with the high table, and everyone was seated at one. Dumbledore was encouraging everyone to try one of the Christmas crackers, and Hagrid and Slughorn were getting more bombastic the more eggnog they drank. The noise definitely made it easy to ignore Malfoy making snide comments about Harry's sweater. And even better, most everyone who had stayed were also people who did not think Harry was the heir, which meant that for once this year he could eat without any fuss. Near the end, Hermione slipped off to attend to the potion, giving Harry and Ron a couple of pastries with the admonition make sure Crabbe and Goyle eat these. There was much debate on just how, since of course they couldn't just give it to them, and they needed to be sure they saw them. Finally settled on levitating the pastries in the hall and just hoping Crabbe and Goyle were that thick. Crabbe and Goyle were indeed that thick. The 2 larger Slytherins were levitated into a closet and relieved of some of their hairs and their shoes. Harry and Ron had some trouble getting the door closed, finally managed, and took off for Myrtle's bathroom. Hermione was bursting with impatience when they finally arrived. Well, she demanded. Got them, Harry said, Ron holding his up too. Hermione nodded, started doling out samples of the polyjuice potion. This should last an hour, she said, handing the samples to them. I've got some Slytherin robes for you and a change of clothes. Put the hairs in. Snips watched carefully as they added their hairs, took a double take at Hermione's as they lifted up the cups. They toasted, got ready to knock the polyjuice potion back. Harry figured quick like cough syrup. Before he could think too much of essence of Goyle being in there, Snips flew up, squawking and carrying on and trying very hard to keep Hermione from drinking her share. Snips, stop it, Hermione scolded, ducking his continued assault before finally knocking back her potion. Ugh, Ron was already green. I think I'm going to be sick, he muttered, right before running for the nearest stall. Me too, Hermione said, running for a stall as well, Snips flying behind her. Harry had only a few seconds to wonder about that before the pain hit his stomach as well. He bolted for a stall with the intention of throwing up. He didn't, but he felt like he had gone through the ringer after a minute of pain. Everything just felt wrong, not like wearing someone else's clothes, wrong, but deep-seated in the skin wrong. Being turned into someone else probably did that to a person. He changed clothes, stepped out of the stall, started back at Crabbe, who started back at him. Harry. Ron, Harry gasped. Goyle's voice came out instead. This is too weird, Ron said, shaking his head and pacing away. Harry looked around for Hermione. Millicent saw Snips perched on top of a stall and peering in. Snips, Harry sighed, going over to the stall. Hermione, are you okay? I don't think I can go with you guys, she squeaked. Hermione, come off it, Ron said, pacing back. We know Bulstrode's ugly. We don't look that great either. Come on, you said we had an hour. Just go on without me. Harry looked at Ron, befuddled. Much better, Ron said, nodding. You have no idea how weird it was to see Goyle thinking. Harry sighed, looked up at Snips, who waved them off before darting into the stall. Okay, Harry said, headed for the door. Come on. It occurred to Harry just how much their plan to find the Slytherin common room relied on Snips. It also occurred to him how much they relied on him to navigate the castle, since their only conclusive knowledge of where the Slytherin dorm could be was in the dungeons, and there were a lot of dungeons. We could see if Slughorn would buy us forgetting where the dorm is. Crabbe and Goyle are dim enough, Ron posed. Professor Slughorn and Hagrid passed out about an hour ago, Harry pointed out, paused to poke his head in. And I don't see any more Slytherins. There you are. Harry and Ron both jumped, spun to see Malfoy stalking to them, looking irritated. Don't tell me you're planning to go back in there and stuff yourselves more, he spat. Come on. Harry and Ron exchanged hopeful glances as they fell into step behind Malfoy. Maybe he was leading them into something incriminating. The Slytherin dorm was not in and of itself incriminating, nor was the password Viscum album, which Harry recognized from potions and herbology as mistletoe, although the view of the lake from well under the surface was cool. You think they see the Kraken through those? Ron asked Harry in an undertone. We'll have to ask Ross after this, Harry whispered to Ron. Or Donald. What are you two whispering about? Malfoy demanded. Nothing, they chimed quickly. Ah, idiots, Malfoy muttered, flopping into a tall chair by the fire. Well, sit down. They did so, Ron constantly flicking glances at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Come off it, Crabbe, Malfoy snapped. The mermaids aren't going to be swimming by tonight. Mermaids, Harry echoed, flat-footed. Of course there were mermaids, there were dragons and three-headed dogs and unicorns. At this rate, he wouldn't be surprised if Medusa and Pegasus were real. Ah, both of you, Malfoy groaned before sitting forward. Well, did you see Potter's face at dinner? First time he's even bothered to show it since that business with the snake. At this rate, I'm inclined to believe he's the heir, and do you know how sickening that is? A Gryffindor as the heir of Slytherin. Don't make me sick. Harry didn't really need the nudge to the side Ron gave him. But he talked to that snake, didn't he? I know it's hard, but don't be thick, Goyle. Potter adores mudbloods. Just look at how he pals around with Granger. And he's friends with the Weasleys, who might as well be muggles. Have you seen them? Now it was Ron's turn to get the elbow to the side. Ah, so if it isn't Potter, then who is it? Ron asked. If I knew, don't you think I'd tell you? Malfoy snapped. I asked Father, but he won't tell me anything about the last time it was opened. Granted, it was before his time, but he says it'd be suspicious if I knew too much about it. Malfoy glowered at that, brightened. But he said that the last time it was opened, a mudblood died. I hope it's Granger this time around. Ron jumped up, to be quickly yanked back by Harry. Malfoy shot him a confused look. What's the matter with you? TH thought I saw a mermaid. Ron tried. Harry ignored Malfoy's dismissive snort. Do you know if they caught whoever did it last time? Oh yeah, Malfoy said. Whoever it was expelled. They're probably still in Azkaban. Where? Oi, the wizard prison, Goyle. I swear any slower and you go backwards. Flopped back in his chair, disgruntled. Father says I need to keep my head down and let the heir do his job, clean up all that mudblood filth, but stay out of it. Doesn't need any more attention on the Malfoy name after the raid last week. Ron perked up. Oh, Crabbe, you're as bad as Goyle. The Ministry raided our manor last week. Luckily, they didn't find anything, and lucky we got our own secret chamber under the drawing-room floor. Ah, Ron said, and Harry could tell it was taking all his energy not to run to the owlery and send a letter to his dad tipping him off. Ugh, why didn't the chamber open a few years ago? Malfoy moaned, putting the heels of his hands to his eyes. Trevor Carson was stupid enough to be muggle-born. Father told me the old potions master Snape had the right mind about things, not all this fretting and fussing like Slughorn does. Snape would have put Potter in his place a long time ago. Sounds charming. He had the right idea about mudbloods, let me tell you. Oi, Malfoy, Ross Ambrose said, coming over. Can I borrow Crabbe and Goyle for a minute? I need some extra muscle. I'll put in a good word with Slughorn if you do. Malfoy eyed him narrowly. It wasn't lost on Harry that despite his talk, Malfoy was desperate to get into the Slug Club. Finally waved them off, leaning back in his chair. Fine, fine, Crabbe, Goyle, you heard the man. Harry and Ron exchanged confused glances, followed Ross up the stairs into the archways leading to the dorm's foyer. Once in the shadows there, Ross turned to them. Hello, Harry. Hi, Ron. They both started. How did you know? Ron demanded, clapped his hand to his mouth when it came out sounding like him. I was sitting across the way reading a book when I happened to glance up. I know those two meatheads don't have a scar and red hair. Ah, Harry muttered, digging into the pockets of the expanding clothes he was wearing. Well, the clothes weren't expanding, he was just shrinking. Finally found his glasses and put them on. Sorry. Don't apologize, just explain. We still suspected Malfoy, and we thought he might tell Crabbe and Goyle something he wouldn't spill to anyone else. Which he did, Ron said, grinning. I have a letter to write, but not about the chamber. Ross nodded, a hand to his face. That's clever, actually. And how'd you do it? Promise not to tell. Slytherin's honor. Give us a frame rate, Ron asked. Mostly it's I won't rat you out unless it directly benefits me and doesn't come back to bite me, so you're good. Polyjuice potion, Harry said. Hermione made it. I helped Hermione. Yeah, Ross said when Harry tripped and fell. You might want to change clothes first. Ross was quick to enlist Fergus's help in getting them dressed in sensible clothing, all in Slytherin colors. Honestly, Fergus teased, if you're going to sneak into Slytherin, you need to at least make sure your clothes fit. No wonder you're in Gryffindor. The plot was appropriately Slytherin. It just sort of fell apart at the end, Ross offered. Does the plot involve wearing boats for shoes? You might want to return those to Crabbe and Goyle when they come back in, Harry offered, tying shoes that fit much better. Oh goodness, I don't know what the plot was, but I like it already. You'll be needing to clue me in. I'll tell you if you agree to stop selling wards against me, Harry shot back. Ooh, bargaining, very Slytherin. That'll be easy, considering I stopped doing that weeks ago. Didn't feel in good taste after the fight in the Great Hall. Well, at least there was that. Slytherin's honor, of course. We used Polyjuice potion to get in and question Malfoy. They thought he'd spill to Crabbe and Goyle, Ross offered. Very clever, Fergus said, nodding. Except I personally wouldn't trust those two to hold a glass of water, let alone a secret. We didn't know unless we tried, Ron said, hopping to his feet. Right, Harry said, doing likewise. Thanks, we'll return these. Nah, keep M, Fergus said, waving them off. Next time try some glamour charms. They're less chancy than Polyjuice, and I'm sure Donald won't object to one of his baby brothers getting sorted into Slytherin. I'm starting to wonder how extensive our family's going to be at the end of the year, Ron said as they headed to the door. Me too, Harry said, reaching the door before rounding on Ross and Fergus to give them the squinty eye. You have mermaids, he accused. Ross blinked. Oh yeah, I guess you wouldn't know about those. Work on glamours and we'll get back to you, Fergus said. Harry and Ron sped back to Myrtle's bathroom, making much better time than they would have in Crabbe and Goyle's robes, skidded in, ran to the stall Hermione had been in, banged on the door. Hermione, open up, Ron yipped. We've got loads to tell you. Harry added, Malfoy has a secret chamber under his drawing room, and Slytherin has mermaids, Hermione. I'm not coming out, Hermione squeaked. Ron and Harry exchanged blank glances. Why not? We wore off a while back. You should be fine. Moaning Myrtle ghosted out of the stall, grinning broadly. Oh, wait till you see, she said. It's awful. Hermione, Harry asked, fully concerned now. If you don't come out, we're breaking the door, Ron said. Hermione finally opened the door, and Harry and Ron realized just why Snips had been so adamant that she not drink her potion. It was a cat hair on Millicent's robes, Hermione sobbed. And the potion isn't for animal transformations. Just look at me, look at my face. Look at your tail, Ron said, looking like he was trying to hold in a laugh. Harry was grateful that Snips lit into him, saving him the trouble of doing so himself. Chapter 23, in which diaries are found. Chapter text. They carted Hermione off to the hospital wing, where fortunately Madame Pomfrey asked minimum questions. Mostly it was spell or potion. Potion, Hermione said miserably. Madame Pomfrey nodded. That'll be a different set of treatments then. Come on to the back, I'll get you fixed up. Harry and Ron would visit Hermione on a regular basis after that, throughout the rest of the break and into class starting again, to give her homework and keep her abreast of the events of the day, Harry sitting at the end of her bed and trying his hand at a scarf. Thus far it was doing better than the hats, although it was turning out crooked. Hagrid tells me I have to keep practicing, Harry said, sighing at the zigzag way the scarf was going. Getting better usually follows that, yes, Hermione said. Her face was mostly back to normal, without whiskers and a cat nose and most of the fur, but she still had the ears and her eyes were still closer to a cat's currently. In other news, tea cozies can be hats if you're in the right mindset, Ron said, indicating his fuzzy orange headgear. Yes, well, any leads? None, Harry sighed. I think the problem is we put too much stock in it being Malfoy. We have no one else to suspect. Do we know any other slimy Slytherins? Ron asked, leaning on his elbow on the edge of Hermione's bed, started when he made something crinkle. What's this? Nothing, Hermione said quickly, moving to stuff it away too late. Ron had pulled out a sparkling gold get-well card and was reading it. The expression of disgust he gave Hermione was impressive. You sleep with a get-well card from Lockhart under your pillow. Hermione snatched it back, was spared answering him by Madame Pomfrey swooping in to dispense more medicine. So I understand we're only 12, but I feel comfortable saying that Lockhart is the smarmiest bloke I have ever met or ever will meet, Ron announced as they headed back for Gryffindor Tower. Harry was inclined to agree, was about to when Snips yipped at something. What? What is it? In response, Snips pointed at a thin trail of black shimmering along the edge of a window. Harry edged closer, trying to make sense of it. Ha, he noised. Ron, come look at this. Have you ever seen spiders do this, Ron? Ron had leaped back as soon as he realized what the shapes were, was blushing red now. I don't like spiders. Okay, Harry said slowly. I mean, lots of people don't, so that makes sense. Ron shook his head. I really don't, okay. I'm staying back here. Harry shrugged, looked at the spiders again. They didn't bother him, since he had to grow desensitized to them pretty quickly for living under the stairs, was puzzled by the fact that they were running in a frantic but orderly line, heading for a small crack in one of the panes. Is there such a thing as magical pesticide? Harry asked finally. That was the only thing he could think of that would make spiders flee so quickly, although it didn't account for the tidy line. Ron shrugged. As one that makes them your neighbor's problem, think Filch. As though the comment summoned the man, Filch's angry bellows started echoing down. That sounds like it's coming from Myrtle's floor, Harry observed. Come on. Fortunately, by the time they reached the floor in question, Filch had vacated it, but why he had been in such a towering mood became clear. It had been totally flooded. I'll give Myrtle this. She doesn't do things by halves, Ron offered. Harry slogged to the girls' bathroom, stuck his head in. Myrtle, are you okay? Oh, go away, Myrtle shot. Come back to throw something else at me. Harry and Ron exchanged blank glances. Myrtle, we didn't throw anything at you. Hesitate. What happened anyway? Someone threw something at her, Ron offered. Wouldn't that just go straight through you, though? Oh, sure, Myrtle yelled. Let's all throw things at Myrtle because she can't feel it. 10 points if you get it through her chest. 50 points if you get it through her head. Harry and Snips both gave Ron a disparaging look when Myrtle dove back into a stall. I thought it was a valid question, Ron offered. But why would someone throw something away here? Harry asked, knowing the irony of that question. Hermione had vanished the rest of the polyjuice potion, but still. Winced when Snips tugged on his ear, looked where he pointed. Hey, Ron, look at this. Hold up, Ron yelped, yanking Harry back just as Snips started squawking. Don't be daft, Harry. You don't just pick up a strange book. Harry blinked at him, wondering how he could phrase his next question without implying that he thought Ron was being dense. Why? Because people have hexed books before. Some of the stories Dad comes home with, like this one book that burns your eyes out, or another that makes you speak in rhymes for the rest of your life, or this one that makes it so you can never stop reading. Okay, Harry said, waving his hands. So what do we do about this book? They considered it, looked at Snips, who shook his head before moving a paw in a very familiar pattern. Ron noised, catching on first. Tug out his wand, pointed at the diary. Wingardium Leviosa. Watch as the sopping wet book rose into the air. Now what? Harry considered. So, it could be a dangerous book. Since someone tried to get rid of it, maybe we take it to a teacher. Flitwick turned out to be closest. Well, no. Lockhart was closest, but they all agreed they wanted someone competent poking at this. I commend your caution, boys. Very good, Flitwick said, poking at the sodden book before casting a few spells on it, one of which dried it. There's definitely some sort of magic within it, but I can't be certain without further tests. I'll call Dumbledore down. We can puzzle it out over tea. Thank you, boys. You may run along now. Will you tell us if you find anything out about it? Harry asked. If it puts you to ease, certainly. The book was a good topic of interest for the next couple of weeks, through to Hermione finally getting out of the hospital wing. Upon cluing her in, she made a beeline straight for the library, looking up instances of hexed books. I'm just thinking she was in withdrawal, Ron told Harry as they browsed the magical creatures section again, looking for something on Snips. You know she'd live in here if they'd let her. Harry nodded, trying his best to tune out the dark mutterings he could hear coming from the next row over. People had spotted him in the library and weren't wasting the opportunity to gossip. The middle of February distracted everyone thoroughly, at least, mostly because everyone was too busy being gobsmacked by the Valentine's Day event Lockhart had organized. Well, the students were gobsmacked. The teachers mostly looked aggravated, with the exception of perhaps Dumbledore, who just seemed amused by the glitter raining down from the ceiling. Aggravated shifted to downright angry when Lockhart's team of Valentine-delivering dwarves kept invading the classes, and even the students stopped deriving any amusement from this after a while. Harry had the misfortune to be caught by one in the middle of class and had a poem recited to him, complete with harp music. The 15th was greeted with a collective sigh of relief. The following weekend saw Harry and Ron being summoned to Dumbledore's office. It must be about the book, Harry supposed. It must be, Ron agreed, considering we didn't do anything to warrant being expelled. Maybe it's about the polyjuice, Hermione fretted, following them. If it was, they would have mentioned you, since it's me and Harry, and we're the ones who found it. They found out shortly, upon tromping up the stairs and giving the password to the Griffin, Jammy Dodger. Dumbledore and Flitwick were both there, as was a handsome adult fox. Dumbledore had been correct about baby phoenixes being adorable. Ah, Harry, Mr. Weasley, Dumbledore greeted. And Miss Granger, what a pleasant surprise. How fortunate that we have a spare cup for tea. Sorry, Hermione said, blushing. We told her about the book, Harry offered. Is that what this is about? It is indeed, although, Mr. Weasley, when we finish I must ask you about your brothers, Dumbledore told him. Apparently there's more of them than I thought. It surprised us too, Ron offered. Dumbledore nodded, pulled the book out, put it on his desk in front of them. You may examine it if you'd like. Harry did, surprised when he flicked it open that it was empty. Was it just a normal notebook? Hermione asked, peering at it as Harry flicked to the front. It's 50 years old, he observed, looking at the printer's information. Tom Riddle. I know that name, Ron blurted, at the looks he got. When I got that detention, the one I had after I got hit by the slug-barfing spell, I had to help Filch clean the trophies in the trophy room, and that one I barfed all over. When you have to clean the same trophy for like 3 hours, you remember it. And do you know what Tom Riddle got the trophy for? Dumbledore asked. Something about services to the school. It didn't elaborate. Dumbledore nodded. Theoretically, back when the chamber was first opened, Tom found who did it and turned them in. Theoretically, sir, Hermione asked. Theoretically, I always felt Tom had a greater hand in the events than he let on. Tap the book. This suggests it as well. They watched as he procured a quill and inkwell, offered it to them. Write something in it. The results may surprise you. Harry glanced at Flitwick, who had been stonily silent throughout this. It's not going to hurt, is it? Not a brief interaction, no. Harry glanced at Ron, who shrugged, dipped the quill in the ink and wrote, "Hello, my name is Harry Potter." Ron swore when the ink vanished, prompting him to get whapped by Hermione, swore again, this time without retribution, when the ink returned. "Hello, Harry Potter. How did you manage to come by my diary?" That was our reaction as well, Dumbledore said when Harry dropped the quill. It's a talking book, Harry tried. No, unfortunately, Flitwick said, speaking for the first time since the meeting started. Tom Riddle was a very accomplished student with an unhealthy fixation for darker arts, but I never thought he'd go there. Dumbledore closed the diary. This is very important, he said gravely. And if you can, I want you to answer honestly. Have you seen this book before you found it? All three of them shook their heads. What is it, Professor? Hermione asked carefully. Something of deep concern, for you see, unless I am very much mistaken, it is Tom Riddle, or at least a part of him. Harry felt himself growing sick as Dumbledore explained what a Horcrux was. As a dark artifact, it can have a fell influence on anyone who was in prolonged contact with it, Flitwick explained. You said someone tried to flush it away. Has anyone you know been behaving oddly? They all shook their heads, racking their brains. No, they didn't think so, and how, precisely, did someone split their soul? Better yet, why? Alas, I do not know, Dumbledore said, putting the diary in a box before sealing the box with several spells. But what I do know is a few means to destroy such an item. We've been doing some extra reading, you see. They nodded, accepted more biscuits in an attempt to get the foul taste from their mouths. But for now, at least, that's one mystery solved, Dumbledore said, getting up and retrieving his pensive. And since I see you need something brighter in your day, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, I don't believe I explained a pensive to you. Seeing a baby fluffy fox did put everyone in a better mood, as did puzzling out just how 3 extra Weasleys escaped their notice all this time. It wasn't until they were back in their dorms and getting ready for bed that Snips let out a startled cry. What? What is it? Harry squawked, diving after Snips as he rummaged through Harry's things, pulling out a sheet of paper. Neville and Seamus scrambled for ink. Dean managed to procure an inkwell first. Snips wrote one word, Ginny. Dead silence as the other boys looked to Ron, who had gone pale. Wait, Ron said weakly. Ginny got a diary this year. It's kind of black. And old-looking. Harry finished, feeling his stomach sink as well. When Ron nodded, we need to make sure. Percy was quickly informed, who asked the other prefect if she could retrieve Ginny from the girls' dorm. Fred and George materialized just as Ginny came downstairs with Hermione, who had heard Ginny's summons and figured something was up. Something was. I want to open with you're not in trouble, Percy told Ginny. Which, being a Weasley, you're going to hear a lot of please follow my scholarly path and not Fred and George's. Oi, Fred and George barked. Ron waved to redirect attention. Ginny, you said you were keeping a diary this year, right? Harry could tell by the way all the color drained from Ginny's face that she knew exactly which diary they were talking about. It's okay, Ginny, Ron insisted. We were just wondering where you got it. Ginny looked like she thought this was an intervention, which is apparently what Fred and George sensed, since they got on either side of her and crouched down in that concerned older brother way, which is what finally got her to break down. Professor McGonagall was summoned, and George carried Ginny as they all tromped up to Dumbledore's office. Once there, Ginny explained in fits and spurts what happened as she was given tea that probably had a calming draught in it, and offered jammy dodgers, and allowed to pet Fox, who had sensed her distress and settled on her lap as soon as she sat down. As it sat, her story was that she had received the diary in with her school things, and since her parents had gotten her books, she had thought nothing of it. When she tried writing in it, the first time the diary introduced herself, and yes, she had thought it weird, but since her parents got it, it shouldn't have been bad so. Snips poked Harry in the neck as Ginny went on to describe what Riddle made her do, how he made her black out, and then she was coated in red paint and chicken feathers. He was behind Fred and George somewhat, so Snips could mime to his heart's content. Someone snooty, stuck up. Malfoy, Harry guessed, prompting Snips to point at him. What about Malfoy? Ron asked. Snips dove under cover as attention shifted to Harry, who had to think, wait, at Flourish and Blots. Harry exclaimed. When Mr. Malfoy grabbed one of Ginny's books, he took one but he put 2 back. I bet anything he slipped her the diary then. Dead silence followed this revelation. This is a very serious accusation, Harry, Dumbledore said. Can you prove it? I know, not really, it's just my word against. Wait, Professor, the pensive. You said you could examine memories in it, which led to retrieving of the pensive, which led to an impromptu lesson on extracting a memory to put in. Dumbledore did the actual extracting, citing that beginners often only got fragments, which led to Harry having to think hard on that day while Dumbledore pulled it out. There was kind of a fuzzy feeling in his head after that, which Dumbledore assured him was normal. We should also retrieve the memories of the incident from the rest of you, preferably now, as corroborating evidence, Dumbledore said, prompting everyone else to file up. The memories went into the pensive, and so did they a moment later. Wow, Harry, Fred observed. So this is what it's like in your head. I like it, George said. Very clean. Give it a few years. McGonagall looked done enough for the whole school. Mr. Weasley, both of you, can't dock points from us, ma'am. We're not in Hogwarts. We shall have to examine that loophole later, Dumbledore assured them, focusing on the altercation between the Weasleys and the Malfoys. Harry, this here. Yes, Harry said, running around so he'd be on the opposite end of the exchange, and marveling at the fact that he was looking at himself glaring at Mr. Malfoy. Watch as he slipped a hand in Ginny's cauldron. Right there, he said, pointing. He only pulled out one, and there, he's putting two back, and the second one's the diary. They were back in Dumbledore's office moments later. The only issue with using memories as testimony is, like with regular memory, they can be faked. However, he said, holding up a hand to stave off the protests, we should be able to prove it from examining the other memories, which should show the same sort of incident, and since we retrieved them before examining Harry's memory, they shouldn't be affected by them. So the memories don't change after they're in the pensive? Hermione asked. No, it's what makes one of them so useful, you see. And no, you can't use one to store your memories of lectures. We've already been asked, Professor McGonagall said wearily. Dang it, was the collective sigh from all Weasleys currently in the room. Chapter 24, in which some loose ends are tied up. Chapter text, the news broke about a day and a half later, after Dumbledore had levied the evidence against Mr. Malfoy, and Ginny was safely ensconced in the hospital wing, and away from prying eyes. Lucius Malfoy had used an innocent first year to smuggle an extremely dark artifact into the school, with said dark artifact being key to the chamber being opened. The chamber itself had been opened by Voldemort, nee Tom Riddle, who had used the artifact to manipulate the poor student, who was most certainly not at fault, into opening the chamber and releasing the monster. The chamber itself had not yet been discovered, but they were confident that the attacks would now cease. All this was in the next morning's edition of the Daily Prophet. The Quibbler had suspended production following Luna's attack, but Harry suspected it'd be coming back with a triumphant bang soon. Course, Malfoy will probably get off, claiming he was manipulated too, Ron groused, glaring at the paper. But between this and the raids discovering other dark artifacts at his house, he's going to be in enough hot water, probably will lose his position on the school board. And Fudge, that's the Minister of Magic, won't touch him with a 10-foot broomstick now. Ron was practically glowing as he came to this conclusion and dug into his breakfast with gusto. This is great, then. Neville agreed, equally excited. Because it means the attacks will stop and this chamber business is over with. And Harry, you can stop hiding now. Everyone will know you're not the heir. That would explain the very loud murmuring rippling through the hall. And while yes, Harry did feel somewhat better about having solved the mystery, he also felt terrible for one person in particular, who by all accounts he shouldn't feel that way about. It didn't take too long to find the silvery head of Draco Malfoy, who was turning all sorts of interesting colors while reading the paper, and getting pointed whispers and stares now. I have something to do later, Harry said. It took a few tries before Harry finally achieved his goal. It had taken both Snips and the invisibility cloak to do it, but he managed to get Draco Malfoy alone. What, Potter? Draco spat. Come to gloat. It's not my style, Harry told him before handing him a book. I wanted to give you this as a loan. Draco took the book, confused, eyebrows knitting in a mix of that and anger. Glamours for all occasions. Why would I want that? Because I've been where you're about to be, and I know it isn't fun. Tell the teachers, ask Flitwick or McGonagall or Slughorn for help. They let you sit in their office and do homework. That's what I did. Malfoy was decidedly confused now. Why are you doing this? Because I spent all year being the center of angry attention, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Push the book back when Malfoy stiff-armed it out. Slytherins are cunning and ambitious, right? So they accept help when it suits them. But Gryffindors are loyal, and they offer help when they need to. Trust me, a glamour is better than breaking down crying after your soup explodes on you. Hesitate. And you can still be awful to me the rest of the year. I know you like that for some reason. Malfoy's expression was a mix of emotions he wasn't wanting to exhibit, judging by the white-knuckle grip he had on the book. No one needs to know you got that from me, and you can put a different dust cover on it. Actually, hold on, he said, digging into his bag. Here. Malfoy didn't take it, still staring at the book. Why? He croaked finally. Why help me? Because it's the right thing to do, Harry insisted. And because, like I said, no one should go through a year like I just had. Malfoy scrubbed a sleeve across his face, snatched the dust jacket away. Your hair is a mess, he managed finally, and your sweater is revolting. Hesitate, but thank you. Harry looked down at his sweater, which had squiggles of every color navigating across a fluctuating neon background. Thanks, he said, looking back up. We won't leave at the same time, so no one knows we were in here. Okay. Malfoy nodded, hesitated like he wanted to say more, left. Snips popped up once he was gone. That was the right thing to do, wasn't it? He asked Snips, who considered a moment before nodding decisively. I thought so too. Despite things being squared away and Dumbledore assuring them he knew of ways to deal with Horcruxes, Harry still felt there were some loose ends to address, namely wherever the chamber was. Come off it, Harry, Ron said. If you know who was behind it and the diary's getting destroyed, then it won't matter, will it? No, Harry said. But it's still something that needs addressing, and if the chamber remains undiscovered, then someone could discover it again, use the monster in it. And what if the chamber is still open? The monster could still be wandering around. Ron made a noise that was somewhere between disgruntled and agreeing. But wouldn't you have heard that voice? I thought we agreed that voice was connected to the monster somehow. I don't know, Harry admitted. But if I don't hear it again, it'll be too soon. Hearing snakes has been enough trouble. Hermione suddenly squeaked, her quill flying. That's it, Harry, she squawked. There's a book around here somewhere. Hold on. Of course there's a book around here. Ron stage hollered after her, keeping his voice low enough to avoid incurring Madame Pince's wrath. We're in a library. Neville blinked after her, looked at them. Where is she going? Ron shrugged, went back to his homework. Gotta go, you gotta go. Hermione was back shortly, however. I checked this book out first year when we were looking for what Snips was, she explained, depositing the book on the table and flipping through it. There should be, yes, here. Turn the book to face them. Here it is. This is the monster in the Chamber of Secrets. Harry and Ron leaned forward, reading. A basilisk, Harry asked. More like great big bloody snake, Ron muttered, poking at the book. Did you see what size this says they get? Hermione rolled her eyes. Read it, it all fits. The dead roosters, the cry of the rooster is fatal to it. The spiders running away, spiders flee before it, but it also says eye contact with it is fatal, Neville read. No one died, fortunately. Harry considered that, looked at Snips, who mimed looking in a mirror. No one did look it in the eye, Harry gasped, making the connection as well. Not directly, Luna had her spectrospecs. You guys haven't worn them, nothing gets seen directly. I'm surprised she could navigate with them. Colin saw it through his camera. Eddie and Justin must have seen it through nearly headless Nick. Nick took the brunt of the attack, but he couldn't die again, so. What about Mrs. Norris? Ron asked. It's not like she had a camera or glasses or ghosts. Harry snapped his fingers, pointed at Ron. The water on the floor, I bet she saw its reflection. How could it have gotten through the castle? Neville asked. I'm pretty sure people would have noticed a giant snake. It doesn't turn invisible, does it? He asked, paling. No, Hermione said. And any enchantments you know who would have used on it wouldn't work. Magical creatures like that are too powerful. My guess is the pipes. It explains why no one saw it, why Harry kept following the wall when he heard it, why it was only Harry who heard it. Those pipes hiss all the time. It's just background noise for us. So a giant snake has been navigating around Hogwarts through the plumbing, Ron said slowly. I can't think of a single thing about that sentence that isn't horrifying. Wait, Harry said, waffling a hand at them. Everyone keeps saying a student died last time the chamber was opened. Haven't we seen a young ghost? Better yet, a young ghost who died in a bathroom where there's a lot of plumbing. Ron and Hermione looked dumbstruck. Neville just looked confused. Ron broke first. You don't mean not moaning Myrtle? It didn't take very long to present their findings to Dumbledore, who led the charge to Myrtle's bathroom, was very kind and grandfatherly as he gently approached the topic of how she died. You see, at the time I entirely neglected to ask, he told her. But if you would humor an old man's folly. He didn't need to sugarcoat it so. Myrtle seemed more than happy to share. Oh, it was dreadful, she said, launching into a story about how Oliver Hornby had teased her something awful about her glasses, sending her crying into the bathroom, about how she had heard a boy hissing some made-up language. So I opened the door to tell him to go away, and I died, she finished happily. Silence. I was kind of expecting a bit more after that build-up, Ron muttered, earning an elbow from Hermione. Was that it, Miss Myrtle? Neville asked. Myrtle considered. All I remember when I opened the door was a set of great big yellow eyes. Over there, she said, pointing at the bank of sinks. Showed them the general area, the lot of them giving the sinks the once over. I think this is a snake on this tap, Neville said finally. Tried the tap, nothing. That one's never worked, Myrtle supplied. Dumbledore considered it as Harry looked at the tap. I must confess that I am not so old that I recall when Hogwarts first got indoor plumbing, he said, and that I have never before had occasion to use this bathroom, although I am surprised no one has ever complained about the tap not working. Usually people just move on to the next tap. Seems a sensible enough action. I wonder if you can only get in if you're a Parseltongue, Hermione asked. Maybe, Ron said, nudging Harry. Come on then, give it a go. What? Harry asked, looking at him. I'm sorry, Harry, Dumbledore said. But since you are the only one here who can, there's nothing wrong with trying. If it doesn't work, we will simply have to find another means. It's just, I don't usually know when I'm doing it, and there kind of has to be a snake. As it turned out, Dumbledore was very good at transfiguration, and the soap on the next sink over was soon a small pink snake with tiny flowers on the scales and a faintly lavender scent. Ah, hi, Harry said, glanced at Ron, who gave him a thumbs up. You think it's just asking the entrance nicely, or is there a password? Neville asked. Perhaps just asking it to open is a good starting point, Dumbledore offered. What's going on? The snake asked. We're just trying to get a door open, Harry told it. Snakes aren't built for yelping in alarm, so it was pretty impressive when the snake did just that and shot off at the one sink, rumbling, then rising, and then there was a steep sliding tunnel before them. Well, Dumbledore announced, this is promising. All students were sent back to their dorms as Dumbledore summoned a team of auras and magical creature removal specialists, only pausing to ask Harry to say open into a shell, in Parselmouth if you'd please. I don't doubt that there is indeed another door that requires opening, but I'd rather not be forced to bring you along into what promises to be a dangerous situation, Dumbledore informed him. That was fine with Harry, as was sitting in a corner of the common room with his friends, as everyone else theorized on just why they had all been sent back to their dorms. News broke in Ravenclaw and Gryffindor first, only because they could see a blindfolded and subdued basilisk being levitated out of the castle, to later be relocated to an unplottable island somewhere in the Pacific where it could live out its days without doing anyone any harm. Dumbledore's speech at the surprise feast next day helped to clear up any questions, as well as bolstered spirits when he announced that the petrified students would soon be rejoining them, and that if anyone happens to spot a lavender-scented snake, please send it up to the headmaster's office, and do try not to get it wet. Everyone was in a fine mood, finer when everyone was back to normal, and did indeed confirm that it was a great big bloody snake that did it. Gryffindor especially happy when Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville earned a good chunk of house points for figuring out the mystery. We will try to have a less lethal school-wide mystery next year, although Hermione was disappointed when the final exams were cancelled as a school treat. Luna, of course, happily demanded an interview, one that Harry was only too happy to provide. Luna also found the lavender-scented snake, which she decided to name Mauve and take home. Apparently, that had required a lengthy discussion with Dumbledore and the agreement that it was best that Mauve not get wet, and that she probably would have a happier diet on mouse-shaped soap, which Dumbledore helped Luna figure out. It was actually kind of entertaining watching the two interact, considering they were matching levels of eccentric, and ended with Dumbledore purchasing a subscription to the Quibbler and giving it a glowing recommendation. Luna reported in her letter to Harry at the beginning of the summer that sales had never been better. Chapter 25, in which Harry is put on a bus. Chapter text summer that year was questionable. Good news. Darby apparently did something on his way out last year because the Dursleys were happy to let Harry keep his stuff in his room this year, which meant he could do his homework for once while it was still fresh. Bad news. The Dursleys made sure to pile a ton of chores on him, with the admonition that he not get his meals unless he finished the insane list they gave him each day. Some days he missed meals altogether, and he absolutely refused to do what Snips suggested and write to his friends asking for help. As soon as he could, yes, he'd write to the Weasleys and ask if he could stay over, but he didn't want to give his home situation away. On the positive side, Harry made extensive use of Neville's pocket pruning shear during his outdoor chores. Since in appearance it wasn't overtly magical and didn't require magic for him to use, he made it a point to use it rather than trudge to the shed and drag out whatever he needed. Although he did have to be careful when pulling it open into one of the larger tools. It was also evident that some of the neighbors and even Aunt Petunia were eyeing it with something akin to envy. Several neighbors were making it a point to walk by on a regular basis, obviously working up the nerve to ask the neighborhood delinquent about the tool he was using. "Oh, a friend of mine gave it to me last Christmas," he said, when someone finally did ask. "He's real big into plants, best in our class on the topic." "So they do teach you at your school?" the person asked, hedging. Harry wondered just how much the neighbors really knew about his education. "Oh, yes. Matter of fact, we're very big on science and mathematics. I'm going to be taking an advanced mathematics course this coming year, actually." Since herbology, potions, and possibly care of magical creatures kind of counted, and arithmancy definitely sounded mathy. He couldn't tell if the person walked off enlightened or confused. Of course, that ended with him getting into trouble, as people started inquiring after Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon about Harry's tool. "And you never said what kind of school Harry goes to. My son was looking for a science-based secondary school." Considering they had never had to elaborate past "he goes to a school for the incurably criminal," this resulted in some spluttering before they insisted Harry was lying, which led to some side-eyeing from some neighbors, and some muttering that Harry heard while weeding the hedges, that come to think of it, Harry's always been quiet and unobtrusive. Something sounds kind of screwy there. Sitting in his room that night with no supper, Harry was inclined to agree. What made things worse this year, though, was the need to have a permission slip to Hogsmeade signed, which said it needed to be signed by a legal guardian. Regrettably, he only had two choices, and with the looming visit from Aunt Marge, he was hard-pressed to find a good time to ask. He finally did manage, though, negotiating around behaving himself and staying quiet with the stipulation that if he did so, Uncle Vernon would sign his permission slip. So all he had to do was survive a week of Aunt Marge. He could do this, he hoped. Snips did not entirely object to being kept in Harry's room while Aunt Marge was visiting. Well, no, that was wrong. He did object to it, strenuously. Matter of fact, he objected strenuously to Harry being here with the Dursleys, especially that nasty, shrieking woman that seemed annoyingly familiar to him and made him want to bite her. He didn't, firstly, because he was better than that, secondly, because he was certain she'd give him food poisoning. Why was Harry even here? He couldn't really think of any spell or blood ward or anything that could justify him living with such a family, and that was before he had seen how Harry had been treated last year. One meal a day was honestly the least egregious thing these people had done. The only thing that had stopped him last year was simply the fact that even with a small growth spurt, he was still about the size of a bat and about as easily crushable. Incidentally, that was what was stopping him this year as well. But he was drifting off topic, which was an unfortunate side effect of not having any way to properly spend his days whilst Aunt Marge was here. Didn't even have the owl here to watch. She had been sent off with the admonition that she not come back until Aunt Marge was gone. Hedwig, at least, shared Snip's opinion of the idiocy of it all, but she was willing to do so for Harry's sake. Mostly because Harry was very desperate for Uncle Vernon to sign his permission slip to Hogsmeade. Honestly, the Sorting Hat was so ridiculously off when it said that Harry had Slytherin traits. He knew Dean Thomas, knew he was good with a quill, could have had him forge Vernon's signature no problem, wouldn't have to kowtow to this pig at all. No one at the school had ever laid eyes on Vernon's signature. Snips could forge it, and it would still pass muster. Especially considering that the permission slips had no spells on them to counter attempts at forgery. Really a daft oversight. But he supposed it acted as a chance to sharpen Slytherin minds, at least. But here he was, mostly because he had flatly refused Harry's order to go with Hedwig, which honestly was probably the only reason the owl finally relented and left, sitting on top of Harry's dresser and bored out of his skull. Sorting through potions in his head was only diverting for so long. On the positive side, Aunt Marge would be gone shortly, along with her nasty dog Ripper, which was probably the main reason Harry had been insistent that Hedwig make herself scarce and Snips at least stay in Harry's room. And should the next 2 days pass without incident, Harry would happily have his permission slip and Hedwig would come back. And if Snips had to spend the next several days inking a letter to the Weasleys because Harry was too daft to ask, so be it. Actually, maybe he could do that. Give him something to do while Harry was trapped in the claws of his relatives. He had squeezed into the trunk, managed to shove out a piece of parchment, was working on getting an inkwell out when Harry came bursting in, slamming the door behind him and flopping down on the bed. Snips ended up dropping the inkwell. Forget the inkwell, squeeze out of the trunk and over to Harry, chittering in concern. Harry sighed deeply, shoved himself up. "We're leaving, Snips." Yes, finally. And really, he'd be dancing for joy but for Harry's stony expression, and the fact that after he packed up and tied together his trunk and Hedwig's cage, he fished his wand out. I know, long story," Harry said, dragging the trunk as Snips flew to his shoulder, still yipping. Later. That wasn't good enough for Snips, but it was going to have to be. Hang on for dear life as Harry sped to the front door. Vernon stepped in the way, a rather ugly shade of puce in his fury. "You," he bellowed. "You bring her back and you put her straight right now." "No," Harry yelled back. "She was cruel and she deserved it." "Oh, good gravy, Harry, what did you do?" Vernon lunged for Harry. Snips saw that as a golden opportunity, snapped at Vernon's fingers before baring his needle-sharp teeth and hissing, promising pain if he even thought about grabbing him. Vernon got ready to grab him anyway. Harry pointed his wand at Vernon. Vernon backed off, jabbing a finger at them. "You wouldn't dare try me," Harry said. "I'm leaving now, and don't you dare follow me." "Good for you, Harry." Snips dug his claws in, aimed one last hiss at Vernon as they left. Whatever had happened, Harry having the gumption to actually up and leave was enough to give Snips some patience in learning whatever the matter was. They made it a good few blocks before Harry finally stopped, put his trunk down. Finally remembered all those featherweight and storing charms you and Hermione worked on. Took you long enough. Seriously, Sorting Hat, whatever gave you the idea that this was a Slytherin? 100% Gryffindor, right down to the boneheadedness. Harry finally sat down on his trunk, looking exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Snips CRR concerned. "I blew up my Aunt Marge," Harry said finally. Like a balloon, not like an explosion. That would explain the odd sight earlier as they were fleeing Privet Drive. Wait patiently for an explanation. Got one shortly. "She was," Harry swallowed hard. "She was insulting my mum and, I tried, honest. I tried ignoring her, but—" Snip sighed and shook his head. Fair enough, he'd have lost his temper too if someone had talked like that about Lily in front of him. "So now I don't know what to do," Harry said, after a few moments of deep, ragged breathing. "I can't exactly walk to London, and I don't know about using my broomstick, and I don't know about using any spells." "Ow, hey, sorry, Harry, but you were starting to get hysterical, and not in the funny way either." Flap his wings a bit to get Harry's attention, look around, fly off to a spot where some bushes were growing, snap off a little twig, land on Harry's knee, and point the stick at Harry's wand. Ron was better at guessing Snip's charades than Harry was, but he'd get it given enough time. "Okay, magic then," Harry said. Snips nodded, waved to get him to stop, turned to face the street, put the paw holding the stick out. Look at Harry, start chirping to get him to imitate, stop suddenly when he felt eyes on them. Snap his head around, look. Something was out there, something that made all the feathers on his head stand on end. "What?" Harry asked, scooping Snips up with his free hand as he stood. "What is it?" He didn't know, that was the problem. It was something familiar, though, something familiar and hated, there. Start snarling, look as big as possible while baring his teeth, except he was no match for Marge's bulldog. He'd be no match for a big black dog that made it look like a pansy. Harry spotted it too, threw out his wand arm to defend himself, backed up, tripped over his trunk. Snips grabbed onto his hand to keep from being flung, and then lights and a deafening honk, and then what Snips had been trying to get Harry to summon came screeching up to the curb. "Hello," a pockmarked young man said, reading from a cue card. "Welcome to the night bus. My name is Stan Shumpike, and I will be your conductor for this evening. What you doing down there on the ground?" I tripped," Harry said. "What you trip for? I didn't do it on purpose." "Well, who does?" Stan asked, which was honestly a good point. Harry come up with better comebacks. Harry, meanwhile, had gotten to his feet and was peering around the night bus. Snips looked too, no dice. The dog was gone, scared off by the bus. Well, it could have been worse. Most likely a stray, although he had a hard time believing that such a thing could happen in Little Winging. He was pretty sure if that was the case, they'd be hearing the hupty-do up at Hogwarts. Stan leaned around the bus. "What you looking at?" "Nothing," Harry said, snapping his attention back to Stan and the bus. "What is this?" "This here is the night bus, emergency transportation for a stranded witch or wizard." "I think I might qualify," Harry said. "Can you get me to London?" "Sure, sure. Hop on. That'll be 4 sickles. 5 if you want hot chocolate or coffee. No, I get your luggage. You get on." Harry clambered on, Snips squinting in the brighter lighting of the bus's interior. Stan had to nudge Harry further in. Harry was too busy gaping at the vaulted ceiling of the bus, the chandeliers dangling down, and the 4-poster beds scattered everywhere. "I love magic," Harry managed finally. Snips sighed. He'd be saying this now, but just wait until the bus actually got moving. Stan hauled the trunk into the bus. Harry stopped him long enough to get the money out to pay for it. 5 sickles. Snips guessed the hot chocolate, and then helped Stan with the trunk when it was obvious the man didn't have enough oomph behind him to lift it by himself. Definitely another Gryffindor. Anyone from any other house would have remembered the featherweight or levitating charms. Come on, you were inside a magic bus that you were allowed to use magic in. Oi. A few minutes later, Harry was settled on one of the 4 posters with Snips and a cup of hot chocolate. Snips took a quick deep sip and grabbed a marshmallow, suspecting the rest would be on the floor soon enough. "So where to?" Stan asked. "The Leaky Cauldron, that's in London," Harry said. Stan snorted, as was expected at such an inane statement. "You hear that, Ern? The Leaky Cauldron, that's in London. Hold on then." As Snips expected, the hot chocolate was yet another casualty resulting from riding on the night bus. Chapter 26, in which finances are finagled. Chapter text Harry's hope that he'd be able to slip into Gringotts and out without being made died the moment he stepped off the night bus. Well, stepped was too bland a descriptor. It was more like diving for the sidewalk, like his life depended on it. Herewith, he resolved that if he was ever stranded, the use of the night bus was only in the case of a truly dire emergency, and even then that was pushing it. It was after he recovered enough to push himself up a little that he realized that Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, was standing over him and had rapidly outed him to everyone within earshot. Stan, who had been depositing Harry's things on the curb, bolted back into the bus to excitedly tell Ern just who exactly had been on their bus. Harry was reasonably sure he was doomed. Fortunately, Fudge assured him that Harry was not about to be expelled for the use of accidental magic, was more interested in scolding Harry for running off like that. Anything could have happened, you know. Even better, Fudge told him that it'd be best if Harry stayed here for the remainder of the summer. They already had a room set up for him. Please don't leave Diagon Alley before the 1st of September. Harry was torn between looking reticent and jumping around with glee, decided the former would do until he was safely ensconced in the room overlooking Diagon Alley, which, by the way, had Hedwig sitting there waiting for him. "Smart owl, that one," Tom told him, pointing at the snowy owl. "Arrived here just moments before you did. Picked a banger of a room she did too, nice view." "Thank you," Harry said. "If you need to move us to another room, I mean it's such a nice room, someone else might." "No need, no need. The minister's already paid you up for the remainder of the summer," Tom said, waving him off. "You just get settled. I'll have some food run up to you in a bit. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Potter." Harry assured him that he would, and the first thing he did upon Tom leaving was jump all over, cheering wildly. This was better than okay. This was brilliant. No more Dursleys for the rest of the summer, and he got to explore Diagon Alley to his heart's content. This was the best birthday present ever. Speaking of, it just occurred to him that Hedwig was, in fact, sitting on a stack of packages. "You didn't carry all of those, did you?" Harry asked, staring at the stack. "First thing tomorrow we're getting you a bag of the best owl treats." Hedwig fluffed up in joy at that, flew over to the back of a chair to let Harry pick up the first package. It was from Neville. The card included said that Neville had been thinking about what would be an appropriate present, since he didn't want to just repeat last year. Although Harry had been very grateful for the sweets, thought that Harry might like a useful plant after talking for a while with his gran, that it was a spider plant, and was great to deal with small pests, please. Don't be surprised if it crawled out of the box when he opened it. Neville had fed it before sending it, but you never knew. Harry, at least, was grateful enough that Neville had thought to warn Harry about it, and it gave him the opportunity to bolt after opening the lid. Something green with a lot of long, thin leaves crawled out, paused a moment on the desk before scurrying off and heading under the bed. Harry waited a few moments before examining the box, pulling out a pot and a fairly thorough list of how to care for the plant, such as if you ever need to replace the pot, make sure it's a sturdy one that isn't tough-heavy to make it easier to crawl in and out, and don't water it too much, maybe once a week, otherwise it'll track mud and not want to go back in the pot. I think Neville might replace Professor Sprout when she retires, Harry told Snips and Hedwig, putting the box and list aside. Snips gave a sort of sideways nod as Harry picked up the next package. This one was from Ron, and the letter made him glad he hadn't tried heading for the Weasleys. They were currently in Egypt visiting Ron's brother Bill, having won a raffle prize that would pay for it, which was awesome. In Harry's opinion, he knew they didn't have a lot of money. Ron spent several pages talking about all the weird things ancient Egyptian wizards did, about Bill's co-workers and their families. The Kanes and the O'Connells sounded like they came out of the adventure movies Dudley watched on occasion. And what Harry's present was. It's called a sneakoscope. It's supposed to detect unsavory characters, according to Bill, but he said I might have gotten a cheap tourist one because it kept buzzing all through dinner. I'm thinking it was just detecting Fred and George slipping beetles into Bill and Percy's soup when they weren't looking. That sounded like Fred and George, to be fair. And the sneakoscope was nice and quiet when he put it on the table, balancing on its point and spinning like a top. Hermione's Gift was the first book in a book series she demanded he read. I've just started it, and I need someone to talk to about it before I explode. Dean gave him a book too, this one about football or soccer, according to the Americans, with the note that I'm thinking about starting a club where we keep up on the sport. Also, you need to read this. I want to annoy Ron. So that was 2 books to read. A third one, considering he was unwrapping another, a familiar one wrapped in a different dust jacket, and with a note with a galleon taped to it. I owe you, but don't collect during the school year. P.S. Buy a less revolting sweater. There was no name, but there didn't need to be, and Harry was operating under the impression that this coming year was looking up. This was confirmed when Snips barked and pointed at his trunk, darted in when he opened it, pushed out the Hogsmeade permission slip with a scratchy signature at the bottom. Well, he supposed it counted. Thanks, Snips. Snips nodded, flew back to the stack of gifts. Ah, right. Definitely his best birthday ever. The only questionable gift he got was another book from Hagrid, and only because it tried to eat him, and the spider plant, which scurried back to its pot to avoid said book. That one, the Monster Book of Monsters, was currently in his trunk and belted shut. Maybe he could feed it one of Dudley's old socks to avoid further injury. Other than that, the rest of his evening went well, with a delicious soup and bread for dinner, which he regrettably couldn't eat all of, and shared with Snips and Hedwig. He decided that the spider plant wasn't interested, and the monster book probably didn't eat soup, and him retiring to his bed, starting on the book Hermione gave him before falling asleep in the comfortable 4-poster. The next couple of days were drizzly and saw Harry indoors, reading and doing homework, mostly in his room before Tom invited him downstairs to do his homework. Diggle's in eating lunch, and he knows a bit about defense if you need help with that. Diggle was very good at defense, once he got over being starstruck at Harry Potter and finally saw a young boy who needed help with his homework, although he was very dismissive of what he had been assigned. I don't think they'll be wanting this when you get back this year, Diggle said, flipping through Harry's homework and noting that it was asking for essays about Lockhart's greatest achievements. Some people have come forward and accused Lockhart of falsifying and stealing all his work. There's a big scandal about it all. Harry was not going to complain about not having to do another Lockhart assignment, nodded and copied down notes about what Diggle said about defense and the basic spells every wizard should know, and how one countered them, since every wizard knew them, over lunch, tea, and eventually dinner, waving Harry off when he apologized for taking up so much of his time. It's no trouble, Mr. Potter, not at all, Diggle assured him, and then went on to tell him the books he should look into at Flourish and Blots, which led to the more excellent part of the summer, Harry having free rein to explore Diagon Alley to his heart's content. He spent the first several days, after the weather cleared, just exploring the alley, going up and down it, and window shopping, and taking note of which stores he definitely wanted to spend more time in, ducking in and taking note how much money he would need if he decided to shop within. Also important, finding out just how far he needed to budget his money. Griffook seemed both bemused and approving of Harry's request. Usually wizards care very little about keeping track of their funds, he explained, pulling out the pertinent ledgers. They just expect more to magically appear and accuse us of rebellion when it doesn't happen. I learned about budgeting in Muggle primary school, Harry said. Maybe that's why. I swear they'll take over the world someday, Griffook sighed, opening the first ledger. Harry really didn't know how to respond to that, instead focused on what Griffook was telling him, about how his parents had left him a substantial fortune, that he did have a stipend budget to take care of his schooling, with the rest available to him when he became of age, that yes, as a 13-year-old, he shouldn't be too concerned with everything just yet, but if he budgeted this much per year, he'd never have to work a day in his life. I'm not sure if I could handle that, Harry admitted. Griffook looked at him over his glasses. Are you sure you're a wizard? Sometimes I wonder. Griffook did recommend investing some of his money into businesses so it would work for him and earn him more money, preferably ventures that interested him so he'd know what he was looking at. Harry was quick to suggest Flourish and Blotz, quality Quidditch supplies, and enchanting everyday wear, where he had gotten all his sweaters last year. Those are all established businesses, so while they won't make you as much their safe investments, Griffook said, it's a start. After that, they hammered out what Harry's monthly budget would be, accounting for the fact that for the next several years, he wouldn't be anywhere where he'd spend money, but for maybe half the year. Harry inquiring about maybe renting a flat in Diagon Alley as soon as he was able, and then budgeting for the change in spending that would bring. It was long enough that tea was brought, and after business was concluded, Harry asked if it was okay if he asked about the Goblin rebellions, saying he wanted to hear both sides. The lengthy discussion that had several older goblins who lived through the last rebellion lasted until dinner, which was had at a restaurant that was good but affordable and recommended to him by one of the goblins. And then a second dinner at the Leaky Cauldron, which left Harry feeling very much like the hobbits in the book Hermione had sent him. In all, a productive day. The rest of the summer was a blur of exploring the alley and doing homework with help from various sources. Florence Fortescue, who ran an ice cream parlor, let him do his homework on the patio and gave him a free sundae every day, talking with him about the other side of the Goblin rebellions and helping him with his history of magic homework. Harry wasn't sure if Binns would notice, but Harry was pleased with the end result. He also bought several new outfits and socks, and a set of trainers that fit from enchanting everyday wear, along with a goodly stack of t-shirts that changed colors in the sun, inspired by Muggle, where that did the exact same thing somehow. The various bookstores also took a hit, especially after Harry finished up his homework and got plenty of free time to himself. He also ended up getting a bustling side business of running errands for everyone, starting with asking Tom if he couldn't help around the inn. I did a lot of chores with my relatives, and I'd like to help if you don't mind. Tom, humoring him, promised him a nut if he cleaned the bar, had come back in surprise to see it spotless. Word spread after that, about how Harry was quick and diligent, and after about a week, he needed a little black book to keep all his various little chores straight, Flourish, and Blotz was happy to provide. Harry kept trying to make peace with his monster book, having a long heart-to-heart with it, and trying to feed it a stack of paper he had bought. It had eagerly eaten the paper, and then Dudley's old trainers and socks, but it left Harry's new shoes alone, so he thought there was progress. Although he did ponder the irony of a book finding his less-than-literate cousin tasty. The main point of news up and down the alley, though, aside from Harry Potter staying for the summer and being the best errand boy ever, no Davin, he worked for me first, I get to hire him when he needs a full-time job, was the escape of one Sirius Black from the wizarding prison Azkaban. The extent of Harry's knowledge of Azkaban was Malfoy mentioning it once last year, but he soon learned more about it than he cared to, reading up on whatever Dementors were had him sleeping with the lights on and the monster book unbelted for several nights in a row. Waking up with the monster book on the bed and dozing next to his feet felt like cause for concern. Sirius Black was a different source of concern. From what he had heard, the man had succeeded in killing 13 people with one curse, which Harry guessed was impressive by the way everyone was talking, but not surprising, considering what he had seen at Hogwarts and the way Seamus Finnegan had blown up that feather first year. From the sounds of it, he was a horrible man who had somehow achieved the impossible. Probably heading this way. Won't dare let the kids out until he's captured, Harry overheard one day, which did make him wonder. Even if Sirius Black was a supporter of you-know-who, which seemed to be the popular theory, Voldemort was supposed to be in a forest in Albania. It'd make more sense for Black to head there, but he was also the first to admit he knew very little about how the criminal mind worked, despite accusations from the Dursleys. But Harry had also had plenty of time to not only ask at the various magical creature shops about Snips. No one had any clue, but they said they'd certainly start looking, mostly because they were certain a potion-making creature would sell like hotcakes, but to also get his school books early and start reading through them. The worker at Flourish and Blatz cried tears of joy when Harry told him he already had a copy of the Monster Book of Monsters, more so when Harry volunteered to handle the books for him. His own copy had long ago ate the last of Dudley's socks and was now working on his shirts, which seemed to take longer, so they'd last a bit. But the ones in the bookstore seemed happy with a thick ream of paper that they quickly shredded. Once that was done, they seemed much more open to listening to suggestions that they behave themselves. The store worker was dumbfounded at such a simple solution, and when Harry walked by the bookstore next, it was with a little sign next to the caged books that recommended buying stacks of paper to feed the books with. In all, it was a very good summer. Chapter 27, in which school starts off scary. Chapter text late, August saw Harry seeing lots of familiar faces, chatting and eating lunch with them, and discussing which classes they had that year. Dean informed him he was taking divination, same as Ron, wondered if he'd be able to see if West Ham would win that year. From what Ron had told Harry, which he had heard from his grandmother, divination was something you either had or did not, and he and Dean both agreed that if nothing came of it, he'd see about fluffing through it for the year, and then asking about changing to something else. Luna was as Luna as ever, with Mauve a few inches longer and looped around her neck like an untied scarf. Harry introduced her to one of the enchanting everyday wears umbrellas, which kept the user dry from head to toe when open and always showed clear skies through the canopy, gave it to her with the statement that it was an early or late birthday gift, depending on how she wanted to swing it, which was how most of his encounters with friends went, seeing as how he had been in the alley long enough to know where everything was and point everything out to everyone. He also gave everyone his 2 weeks' notice and asked if maybe he could do this again next year. General consensus was that they'd see, but were open to the concept. It wasn't until the week before September 1st that Harry saw Ron and Hermione, more than happy to greet them both and give them their copies of the monster books, since they were both taking care of magical creatures. Both books had been acclimated to people and came with a big bag of paper. They, like all his other friends, had been apprised of how he had come to be in Diagon Alley to begin with, and they couldn't have had different reactions if they tried. But that's horrible, Hermione said over Ron's laughing. You could have gotten in serious trouble, Harry. But he didn't, Ron gasped. Course he didn't, he's Harry Potter. I would have been sent to Azkaban for that. Mind you, they'd have to dig me up first, because Mum would have killed me. Harry wobbled his head, acknowledging the situation, was more than happy to lead them on to the next topic of interest, that of Scabbers' health. I don't think Egypt agreed with him, Ron said, holding the rat up as they headed for the nearest pet store. He's been looking peaked for weeks. Maybe there's a potion for rats, Harry asked, looking at Snips. Snips thought about it, nodded, mimed being hanged. Maybe there's a nice potion for rats. Snips shrugged at that, and by that time they were at the store. Ah, Harry, Lana greeted, coming in from the back. Nothing on creatures resembling your friend yet. That's too bad, Harry said, truthfully. If you find anything, can you send it to Hogwarts? Sure, so what can I do you for? Ron fretted as Lana gave Scabbers the once over, then a twice over, then a third pass. Well, honestly, all I can recommend is a tonic, she told him finally. It'll reduce most ailments of older rats. How long have you had him? He's been in the family for over a decade, Ron said. He was Percy's, my brother's rat to start with. Awfully long-lived for a common garden rat, Lana said, poking at Scabbers. But with that in mind, I hate telling pet owners this, but you're going to want to keep him comfortable while, well, he's approaching the end of his life expectancy, to be honest. Ron seemed crushed by that, and despite never having much to do with the rat, Harry felt sorry for Scabbers. The cat attacking Scabbers, and then later being adopted by Hermione, didn't help matters. Dinner that night was spent with the Weasleys and hearing all about Egypt. It was good to see them again, and to see Ginny in good health and spirits. It was odd, though, when Mr. Weasley pulled him aside. "Now, Harry," he told him, "I've already told my kids this several times, and I told Hermione too, but I want you to be very careful this year. There's not another basilisk or three-headed dog, is there?" Harry asked. "I certainly hope not, but no. You've heard of Sirius Black by now, I'd wager." When Harry nodded, "I want you to be careful, extra careful, until he's captured, do you understand? No going off by yourself, no hunting him down." "Two questions," Harry said. "Maybe three. One, why would Black come to Hogwarts? Two, how would he get in Hogwarts? And three, why would I want to hunt him down?" Mr. Weasley considered this, patted Harry on the shoulder. "Fair point. You'll be smart and stay out of trouble then." "I keep trying." That night, Harry gave the whole room the once-over, even with Tom assuring him he'd send anything he might have missed along to Hogwarts. Packed several books in his travel tote, everything else in his trunk. Debated before putting the spider plant in the tote and the monster book in the trunk, giving it a pair of Dudley's old jeans, and telling it to not chew on any of his books or papers, please. It seemed content to gnaw on the faded denim, so Harry had some hope. The morning of September 1st saw the Ministry of Magic providing cars for them to make the trip to King's Cross, which was cool, and the gate actually let Harry through this time, which was even better. Goodbyes were said, luggage was loaded, everyone gave assurances that they'd behave themselves, Fred and George with their hands behind their backs, fingers crossed, and soon enough the train was leaving the station, which left them with the issue of finding an empty car, or maybe one with friendly faces in it. Fred and George quickly dispersed, as did Percy, who at the very least had prefect duties. Ginny disappeared in the other direction, seeking out her friends, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione were left trying to find a car that wasn't standing room only. It was surprisingly difficult, considering this was most likely a magic train. They finally gave up, settled on a cabin that was otherwise unoccupied, but for a man curled up in the corner and sleeping. Snips growled and tugged on Harry's hair, pointing away from the cabin. "We can't, Snips. We've been up and down the train twice now. Everywhere else is full." Snips sighed heavily, made Harry sit in the corner farthest from the sleeping stranger, flitted down to his leg to glare at the man, and silently growl the whole time. "Wonder who this guy is," Ron mused. "Sir R.J. Lupin," Hermione reported. How did she know?" In response, Hermione pointed at the trunk overhead. "His name is on the trunk, and since we're in need of a defense teacher again." "Ah," Ron peered at the man. "Doesn't seem all that sturdy." "Ron." The man stayed resolutely asleep through most of the train ride, though, from the lunch trolley trundling by through several rounds of chess, and then through a long discussion about the book Hermione had given him, The Fellowship of the Ring. "If this shows up in Muggle studies, can I borrow it?" Ron asked, having spent most of that round of chess listening in and stealing Harry's pawns while he was distracted, and offering points where what Tolkien wrote differed from the actual magical creatures. "I don't think it'd be covered this early," Hermione offered. "The Hobbit, maybe, but not this." Really, the trip was quite pleasant right up until the Dementors decided they wanted a ride. When Harry came to, it was to find everyone hovering concernedly over him and the now-awake defense professor offering him chocolate before heading to the front of the train. From the rippling conversation, no one had had a pleasant experience with the Dementors, although Harry was the only one who had fainted. This quickly became the top headline. Harry ducked his head at the chatter rippling up and down the students as they made their way off the train and to the carriages. Apparently everyone had heard about him fainting on the train, although Malfoy's attempt at belittling him was cut short by Snips diving for him, hissing and spitting the whole way. He returned to Harry just as they were reaching a carriage, landing on his shoulder and wiping his beak. "You really shouldn't be biting, Malfoy," Harry pointed out, climbing in. "Yeah," Ron agreed. "Don't know what kind of germs that gets got." "Ron," Hermione sighed. Getting sidelined by the teachers before they could even reach the Great Hall only compounded the problem, as did Madame Pomfrey being in the room. "Could you not even wait until term started?" she asked, examining Harry and handing him another bar of chocolate. "I was actually kind of hoping I could skip the hospital wing this year," he sighed. "I was too. We don't grant bonuses for frequent visitation, Mr. Potter." and Ron were dismissed after the adults were assured they were fine, although Hermione was further detained by Professor McGonagall. "We're just needing to discuss her schedule," McGonagall said, waving them off. "Go take your seats. She'll be with you in a moment." They hastened to do so, managed the Great Hall in record time. Neville spotted them, stood and waved, prompting them to run over and sit next to him. "What we miss?" Ron asked. "Just the sorting. It was a good year for Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff." "Where's Hermione?" Neville asked, looking back at the door. "Professor McGonagall wanted to talk to her about something," Harry said, looking, "but she should be, yeah, there she is." Hermione scurried over and sat down, tucking something under her sweater. "So what did Professor McGonagall want to talk to you about?" Harry asked. "Just how to budget my time this year," Hermione said. "I have a planner and everything, past the potatoes." That felt like there was more to it, but Harry didn't have the energy to question it. Dinner was a blur, and he was going to have to ask Percy about the password again because he didn't quite register it. He did, however, make time to put the spider plant on his bedside table. Neville gave it a once-over and declared it healthy, told Harry they could discuss it over breakfast tomorrow. Let his monster book out, it was still happily teething on the jeans, and make sure Hedwig and Snips were settled in before collapsing into bed himself. Traveling really shouldn't be this exhausting. Chapter 28, in which classes start. Chapter text breakfast the next morning saw Harry much improved, discussing the spider plant with Neville, who assured Ron that, with the exception of the multiple eyes and the habit of eating bugs, had very little to do with actual spiders, until their schedules arrived. That was the fresh topic, and they spent the next few minutes swapping schedules to see who was going where. "Hermione, your schedule is impossible," Ron declared. "Honestly, Ron, not everyone is as terrible at managing their time as you," Hermione said. "No, I mean it's literally impossible. You've got 3 classes for 10 o'clock. 3, in one time slot. How are you even going to do this? You can't be in 3 places at once." "I'll manage," Hermione said, polishing off her breakfast before snatching her schedule away. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get to class." "But which one?" Hermione. Watch as she stormed off, looked at Harry. "She can't be in 3 places at once, right?" "Well, I know we can't," Harry said. "Maybe it's something magic. I mean that covers a lot of what muggles think is impossible so." They spent the rest of breakfast and the entirety of their trip to their first class debating on what could possibly allow Hermione to be in 3 places at once, and agreed to ask Professor Slughorn if there was such a thing as a cloning potion as soon as possible. Professor McGonagall would be consulted about cloning spells, and both were definitely going to be reassured that it was because of academic curiosity only, mostly because they had to agree they had a habit of getting into trouble. Third-year classes were definitely more challenging, even before factoring in the extra classes. Harry and Hermione both had arithmancy that morning, which felt very much like math, and which Harry realized he hadn't really done much with since starting Hogwarts. This was a problem, as it turned out. Hermione likened it to trying to ride a very rusty bike after not riding one for ages. Most of their other classes were the same and just fine, with the only hiccup being Ron coming down from divination and saying that Professor Trelawney had predicted Harry's death, and that Hermione was somehow in that class as well. Hermione talking about divination and arithmancy in equal measure did nothing to clear up the confusion. Lunch was good, though. Lunch was very tasty, and saw a visitor from the Ravenclaw table. "Hey, Luna," Harry greeted as she sat down next to him, Mav in her usual place of curled around Luna's neck, blinked at the green quill floating next to her. What is this?" "It's a quick quotes quill," she explained. "Dad got it for me, spent a lot of time looking. He said it's very important to get a well-mannered one. Otherwise, they write all sorts of strangeness." Sentient quills really shouldn't have surprised him at this point. Is it for taking notes during class? No, I already asked so Fitzherbert could have something to do during the day, but they're banned unless there's a legitimate medical reason. That made sense, he supposed. So, why is he here? That was about when Carlin Creevy plopped down next to Luna, breathless with excitement, and Harry was forced to note that they both had press hats on. It's for the Quibbler, Luna reported. Writing opinion pieces about Sirius Black possibly heading here, and how people feel about this compared to having a basilisk roaming about the castle last year. I'm more concerned with the Dementors, personally, Harry said, blinked when Fitzherbert the Quill started scribbling away. Ah, Luna looked at what it had wrote. We should definitely ask what people think of the Dementors, she decided. But I think Harry would prefer if you just wrote green eyes. Harry stood to look at the notepad. Yeah, the glittering green of a sun-dappled forest is a bit much. Very much so, Mauve said, which resulted in the quill bobbing again before scribbling that out. I do like the bit about the hair, though. Keep that in. Fitzherbert understands Mauve, Harry had to ask. He does. It's been a very useful talent, Luna said. Very useful, Mauve agreed. So what do you think of Sirius Black? Luna asked. I know that he killed 13 people with one spell and escaped from Azkaban. That's the extent of my knowledge, Harry told her. I heard that Azkaban's supposed to be inescapable, though, Dean Thomas put in, Fitzherbert scribbling away. Course, Alcatraz in America is supposed to be inescapable too, but people managed. Dean Thomas, Luna said, when the quill looked at her. There wasn't a better description Harry could come up with, to be fair. Dean, you don't mind going on the record, do you? No, I'm cool with it. And I agree with Harry. The Dementors are the more pressing concern. They're creepy. That was the general opinion regarding the Dementors, and more than a few students had said that, after telling their parents about the things, quite a few had sent in letters to both Dumbledore and Fudge, after the former had informed them that he felt much the same way. But for some reason, the Minister of Magic had seen fit to do so. Poor fellow, I think he must be overworked. Harry was very much not surprised at the thickness of the next issue of the Quibbler, although the conspiracy theories were comfortingly crazy, as per usual. Although he had to say, he hadn't been expecting wizards to be aware of space aliens. Harry had been very much looking forward to care of magical creatures, not the least because Hagrid was teaching it. As they filed down to Hagrid's hut, it became very clear who had bought their books before, and after Harry had shared the little tidbit about keeping them fed on scrap paper. His was still gnawing on the jeans, which meant he might have finally found something that kept it properly preoccupied. Hagrid was amused at this news. I figured feeding it was the sensible approach, Harry supplied when asked. Offering some at Tarit is always a good starting point with regular animals and magical creatures alike, Hagrid agreed. But tar start the class. Open your books to page 29. Ya gotta stroke the spines. Gentle touch is what gets you in. Go on. There was a lot of murmuring and muttering at that. Harry had to promise his book it'd get the jeans back after class before it relented. After that, Hagrid went over some of the basics of what they were going to be covering. That magical creatures were special because they had some magical use, or were specifically associated with the magical world over the Muggle world, although there was some overlap. How that any encounter could turn into a good one if they just knew how to show said creature respect, which led to them being introduced to hippogriffs. Harry and Snips had both been keeping half an eye on Malfoy, expecting trouble from him, even with Harry sending him a letter that said behave in Hagrid's class, and we'll call it even, wasn't expecting him to suddenly display a lot of interest. He and Harry both were the first volunteers, and when Hagrid asked if anyone was interested in maybe taking a ride on Buckbeak, one of the hippogriffs, Malfoy was quick to have his hand up again. Professor, how does one go about owning a hippogriff? Malfoy asked after what had apparently been an exhilarating ride. Harry was beginning to recognize Slytherin cunning when he heard it. I mean, is it possible? My family has the space. Space is definitely the first thing Yale be needin', Hagrid told him, nodding. A hippogriff would need all the space a horse would need, plus space to fly. If ye live near Muggles, Yale have to have a disillusionment charm on them most days. Mother is good at those. Hagrid considered it, assigned homework when the bell rang, detained Malfoy. Tell ye what, you help with the hippogriffs. Let me see that ye can take care of one, that you're responsible and whatnot. I'll put in a good word with your ma. Really? Malfoy asked, trying to school his excitement and failing. Sure, let me see your schedule, this night, and Saturday morning should do it. Get on with ye then. Right, thank you, see you later, Buckbeak, Malfoy said, running back to the castle. Ron watched him go, looked back at Hagrid. Are you sure about that? I mean, it is Malfoy. Great thing about animals, magical or otherwise, they're great judges of character, Hagrid told them. You lot got time for a cuppa. You can tell me what you thought of me first class. You did excellent, Professor, Harry said, grinning, something heartily seconded by Ron and Hermione. Hagrid was blushing as he ushered the hippogriffs back into their enclosure. Their first defense class went very well for about 50% of the class. Professor Lupin had them going up against a boggart, which, as he explained it, would morph into their worst fear. The best way to counter such a creature was to use the spell Ridiculous and think of something funny, since laughter was a boggart's bane. Things were going quite well, and Harry was busy thinking of what the boggart could possibly turn into, and what he could turn it into that would make it funny. He thought it might turn into Voldemort at first, at least, until he remembered his experience with the Dementor on the train. That, he was pretty sure, would top some weird wizard that just wanted him dead. He was busy trying to think of something that would turn a Dementor funny, wondering if he could get the spell in before it started affecting him. He never got the chance after Neville went. Neville's boggart turned into some scraggly-looking woman, making him freeze and necessitating Professor Lupin stepping in. The boggart turned into a silvery orb that Professor Lupin turned into a balloon and sent zipping back into the cupboard before ending the class early. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, along with the rest of the class, was busy discussing why the class had been ended early as Professor Lupin escorted a shell-shocked Neville away. I wonder who that was, though, Hermione said as they headed for the Great Hall. I wouldn't expect a muggle-born to know, Malfoy spat, changing terms quickly upon spotting Snips snarling at him. That was Bellatrix Lestrange, big supporter of you-know-who, had the right idea about muggle sympathizers. Really, Malfoy, Ron shot back. Why don't you share why you recognized her? Must be nice seeing dear old Auntie without Dementors hovering about. Malfoy quickly vanished after that. The Malfoys are related to Lestrange, Harry asked. Ron twitched a shoulder. Pretty much every pureblood family is related to each other somewhere, bit concerning, come to think of it. But Lestrange, Hermione prompted. Ron shook his head. She was one of you-know-who's followers. I heard she tortured a family so badly that they went insane. Maybe Neville heard about it. Harry looked at Snips, who shook his head minutely. Harry agreed. Neville's reaction was more than just hearing about something awful. Professor Lupin escorted Neville to the Great Hall shortly before lunch ended, talking with him calmly and patting him on the shoulder. Neville still seemed dazed as he walked away, clutching a potted plant that had a couple of daffodils in it. Harry popped up and caught him, steering him over to where they were sitting before sitting him down. Are you okay? He asked, sitting next to him. Neville nodded. Just wasn't expecting that. Snips watched him carefully, glanced at the daffodils before meandering over to one of the truffles and pulling it over to in front of Neville, chirping at him before pointing at the dessert. They waited until after Neville's moment of silence and truffle before talking again. What are the daffodils for? Hermione asked. Some color returned to Neville's face. They're a special breed. Professor Lupin said that a witch in the United States bred them, and that their pollen is being studied by potioneers for use in cheering potions. They're supposed to improve one's mood. Why that was so became clear when eyes blinked open on the flowers, and they started honking. Sounds useful, Harry said, glancing at the others. It was agreed upon quickly and quietly. They wouldn't bring Lestrange up again unless Neville did first. It took until 5th year before the subject was broached again.